expertise. And I think you can see it now also that we're also giving some of the international expertise and scientists the nationalship of Saudi Arabia. So we focused on four main pillars when we developed the framework of the national investment strategy. We started from developing the opportunities, unlocking new sectors, the funding barriers, removing all of those from our investors, and then making sure that we stay very competitive and make sure that we have a very good environment for our investors and our companies. The numbers speaks about themselves. We were the fastest growing GDP back in 2022 between the G20 countries. We are also the largest population and the largest country between the GCC. So when you enter Saudi Arabia, you make sure that you are sitting at the biggest economy in the region, and also you can make sure that you put your hands on the rest of the other countries. But above all, we are a population now, although I still have a problem with this number, but I don't think we are 32, I think we are more than 32 million in Saudis. Almost half of those are expats. Non-Saudis have been in our country for almost 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and with 28 airports, most of them are internationals, 11 seaports, and 7 hours from almost 50% of the rest of the markets. It's not only the economy, it's not only where we make sure that we make money and attract more foreign direct investment, but it's also the environment that we care about. We are sitting in a very dry location, so His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, introduced this initiative around 5 years ago, the Saudi Green Initiative, where we are trying our best to plant multiple millions of trees in the country and around us. And myself and my team will be here today to talk to you about everything you need to know about establishing in Saudi Arabia or establishing in Saudi Arabia. But today we have lowered all the requirements for you. Even if you want to challenge us to get you an investment license within 24 hours, we are up for that challenge. But today we have unlocked almost every sector you can know with 100% ownership in that sector. You can own your company and just become operational immediately. And then it's not just the license itself. We consider ourselves your advisors, your consultants, whether you want to ask about our weather, our culture, our food, or where to put your children, which schools. So, and this is why we're in Canada also today, because we want to see the best schools that work for our expats in Saudi Arabia. And we're talking about the ideation, from the ideation phase of your business until the activation and the operation. We will be with you in every phase and each phase of those. And plus, we have another 300 and plus government entities sitting back home. So we make sure that we introduce you to all of them. We make sure that even if you need additional permits, additional requirements, so we consider ourselves an extension of your team where we can work with you on implementing your ideas. And then we have also created many of those other programs that could help our investors. One of them is the premium residency, which is basically the green card system. Today, expats and non-Saudis can benefit from this program in Saudi Arabia. We're also working with our partners locally and globally on the localization of the global supply chain. As you can see, the whole world is in conflict today. There are a lot of issues geopolitically, so we need to make sure that the supply chain does not get hurt or affected. So we're making sure that we work with our partners on localizing those supply chains in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia by creating free zones, special economic zones, and the list goes on. And then when it comes to incentives, we tried our best to create a national incentive committee and a list of incentives, more than 1,000 incentives off shelf that investors today can benefit from, plus being one of the lowest countries in taxation in general. And again, thanks to my colleagues and our Minister, His Excellency Minister of Investment, we've unlocked every sector you can think of, from manufacturing, automotive. I've never imagined that my country one day will manufacture machines or manufacture cars, but today we are talking about manufacturing electrical vehicles in Saudi Arabia, and you will see the first edition of Lucid motor cars coming up in the next coming months. And also we're covering now the biotechnology, we're covering education and training, healthcare, and every other sector you can think of. And of course, until you see us or meet us, you can just go to Invest Saudi on your Google, just a normal search. You'll see a full portal that is full of information about the value propositions of the sectors and everything. And again, you can also scan this barcode if you want to get more information. We will be with you all day today, me and my team, and with His Excellency the Assistant Minister, which will join us on the stage shortly. Thank you very much for your great hospitality. We look forward to doing more with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for providing that lightning quick overview of the innovation occurring in your country, and also for setting the stage so ably for the conversation that we're about to have the opportunity to listen in on now. And to lead that conversation, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage the Chairman and CEO of the Canada-Saudi Business Council, that is Jeffrey Steiner, and we're looking forward to hearing from him now. Let's welcome him.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and good afternoon, bon après-midi, and salam alaikum. As Catherine mentioned, one of the many hats I wear is I chair the Canada-Saudi Business Council, the CSBC, and the Business Council is designated by the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as the entity, the bilateral trade and investment organization between our two countries. And of course, we work with the private sector, connecting the two private sectors, co-investment in both directions, and working very closely with our governments and embassies and ministries. Now, members of the Canada-Saudi Business Council include Hatch, Bombardier, Brookfield, Weatherhaven, BMO, General Dynamics Land Systems, and Sagard Holdings, amongst 5 or 6 or 7 others. And they're very active in promoting the connection between the two countries, of course, promoting their own businesses and investments, but are really helping to make sure that the relationship grows and takes off. And as two G20 countries, Canada and Saudi Arabia have a great deal that they can do together. So I encourage you to think about the kingdom and the region as a potential partner in your businesses. Now, this fall is the beginning of our 10th anniversary. I wasn't there at the founding, but 10 years ago, 2015, the Canada-Saudi Business Council was established, and this visit by the Assistant Minister from the Ministry is part of the celebration of the 10th anniversary, and it continues into 2026. We have two-way visits from Canada to Saudi, from Saudi to Canada, and we're one of the few bilateral councils where we've put into the mandate that the Canadian companies and the Saudi companies will look to work together in third countries in different places around the world. Now, leading the ministry and the relationship is this Ministry of Investment of Saudi Arabia, MISA, and we're very pleased and privileged to have His Excellency Dr. Abdallah Al-Dubaiki here. He is currently serving as the Assistant Minister of Investment of Saudi Arabia, or MISA. Now, the Kingdom has been very wise recruiting business leaders to move from the private sector into service in government. And Dr. Abdallah is one such leader. And if you get to meet him during the conference, like so many Saudis, he, of course, is an engineer and an MBA, incredibly educated and experienced people. And Dr. Abdallah's 30-plus years of business and now government service has primarily been in global logistics, trade, and investment. And amongst the many corporations he's led is a very important one. He was the founder of a company called Saudi Arabia Livestock Investment Corporation, or SALIC. He was the founding CEO, and they've helped, that organization has helped in nation building in Saudi Arabia and food security, but has also helped Canada in its nation building, because SALIC purchased the privatized wheat board. So they're the owners of the Canadian Wheat Board, and you would not believe the amazing investment and expansion that they've done in infrastructure and ports and terminals since investing in that. So with that as a bit of his background, there's too many boards that he's served on. I want to just ask you to join me with a great Toronto Global Forum and Canadian welcome to His Excellency Dr. Abdallah Al-Dubaiki.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jeff. Actually, Jeff forget to tell you something, that the most important terminology I learned while we are creating G3 is the fish window. So it took me a while to understand what is that terminology is, and I realized later on, for those who's not from British Columbia, fish window, that's mean from a certain time in July until a certain time in October, you cannot dig near the sea in order not to disturb the fish. So that's Canada. I mean, I would like to appreciate how much that you take care of fish, and making us waiting for a few months with our piles sitting aside. We're unable to dig those piles considering the fish. Thank you for a country that they take care of everything. Anyway, I would like to start with thanking the organizers of Toronto Global Forum for bringing us all together. I'm proud of being here in Canada. And of course, I mean, for the last 2.5 years, there is a tremendous growth within the Canadian companies coming to Saudi Arabia. For me personally, it is both pleasure and a privilege to be back in Canada, where I've spent important time across my previous roles, perhaps as mentioned by Jeff, which is during SALIC, when we created SALIC and Bungie, we created G3 after the success acquisition of Canadian Wheat Board. We've grown the Canadian Wheat Board from 13 country elevators to 27, to lake terminals, to a huge terminal in Vancouver. Actually, it is the largest now in the world. It is a very innovative one. Trains can offload while they are moving around, the terminal, and it is the only terminal that can load 3 ships at the same time. So it is really a logistics. We will talk about it a bit later on. While Saudi-Canadian bilateral relations are over half a century the making, our economic ties have grown exponentially in recent years. In fact, Canada FDI stock in Saudi Arabia amount to $1.7 billion now, and nearly half of all the Canadian business now present in Canada have established their foothold in just last 2.5 years. In total, more than 530 Canadian companies are in sight, with 12 of those opening. Also, they have the regional headquarters in the kingdom, demonstrating Canadian investors' confidence and strategic value and the strategic value that they see operating from the heart of the MENA region. There is also close alignment between our Vision 2030 and Canada Agenda 2030, with both blueprints in integrating sustainable development while chartering a clear inspiration of the green economy and leveraging new technologies. And in parallel, our sectorial strengths mirror each other's, and we will demonstrate that in a while. And with your permission, I would like to touch on a few of those strategies. I'll start with agriculture, since it is the subject of talk, and of course that touches all of us and both of the countries. You have, of course, the privileges of having a competitive advantage of oversupply, and of course we have the need because we are a desert country. Agriculture, Canada stands among the world's leading exports of grain, oil, seed, and livestock, while the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is advancing food security and diversifying its economy under Vision 2030. In terms of numbers, agriculture and food processing together contribute about $48 billion or 4.4% of Saudi Arabia GDP, which equals roughly to $1,350 per capita. At the same time, Saudi Arabia represents 60% of MENA food market, which is projected to surpass $130 billion by 2030. While the global halal, which is something that we will be working together with you in that, it is a very important market, now it's expected to reach $1.7 trillion, US dollar, of course. By comparison, Canada agriculture's and agri-food system generates $100 billion or some 7% of your national GDP, equivalent to $1,650 per capita. These figures demonstrate both progress in the kingdom has made, its pivotal role in regional hub and gateway for food security and halal export, and they highlight the complementary things that Canada can bring through its world-class agri-food expertise and sustainable standards. A flagship, of course, example, Saudi Arabia-Canadian partnership in G3 Canada, which is we mentioned already, in passing area which co-owned by SALIC and Bunge with more than $1 billion already spent in that project. Of course, this is, it is a grain network and it's a grain logistics that we are proud of. And what we are planning is, with the permission of SALIC new management now, is to expand the activities of SALIC to cover various agriculture and agri-industries, such as the livestock and meat processing. Another example, which is the red meat, and of course you have a lot of expertise in this, and you have surplus so far. If you look at the numbers, you will see that clearly point strong potential for collaboration in feed, livestock, and meat processing ventures, building resilient supply chain that meet growing regional demand. And by expanding the G3 model, which is I already talked about, beyond grain, to include red meat, feed, agriculture, and processed food, both Saudi Arabia and Canada can co-invest to advance their national food security goals, while contributing to the global food security in general, and securing sustainable food system for future generations. Another vertical is mining. And of course, Canada is well known for that, where Saudi Arabia leaped from 104th place in 2013 to 23rd place last year. A remarkable achievement that reflects the kingdom transformation into one of the fastest growing and most attractive mining economies in the world, and been by $2.5 trillion worth of variable minerals reserve as of today. And my colleague Fahad, correct me, we explored only 40% of the Arabian Shield so far. It's not the whole kingdom. The minerals that we have to secure essential resources, among them is the iron ore. We have copper, nickel, and lithium. To demonstrate mineral processing and other industrial activities, we have also launched a mining fund amounted to $15 billion. With other incentives, of course, for those who is exploring in Saudi Arabia. These resources obviously also are components of the IEFA manufacturing, where Saudi Arabia has ambition to producing close to 500,000 IEFAs per year by the end of this decade, and where Canada abundant resources of nickel and cobalt could help track between our countries. A third sector is the petroleum-based products, where Saudi Arabia and Canada, as world-leading producers and exporters, can deepen our relationship in joining forces, expertise, and experience to advance energy security and contribute to developing safer, and more sustainable energy practice in global scale. Similarly, we are aligned in our ambition to expand our position in LNG, as evident by the Canadian 8 LNG projects and Aramco announcement only 2 years ago of its first international LNG investment when it took minority stake in mid-ocean energy for $500 million. The same can be said for renewables, where Canada is one of the world's leading countries in both production and consumption, and with 12% of your total power generating projected to come from new renewable sources such as wind, solar, and tidal waves by 2035. You're also one of the world's top hydrogen producers, in addition to holding high ambition in cutting greenhouse gas emissions and building carbon capture and storage. In the Kingdom, our goal includes having 50% of our energy production stem from renewables by end of this decade, while Saudi Aramco CCS hub aims to store up to 9 million tons of CO2 per year by the year 2027. To mention, but not to just these two examples, overall, we see great opportunities in bringing Canadian know-how to advance the Kingdom's massive untapped potential in solar and wind, and to increase our green hydrogen production and build resilient supply chain. Ladies and gentlemen, biotech represents yet another area of great complementary between the two countries, and Canada is the world's 9th largest pharmaceutical market globally, while Saudi Arabia's clear goal is to be the leading regional and global biotech hub, offering cross to import and to growing regional markets and contributing $35 billion to non-oil GDP by 2040. To achieve this, we take a comprehensive approach to biotechnology development focused on building an entire ecosystem for basic research to commercialize and localize or of manufacturing of these products. This holds a great potential, whether through JVs or localized Canadian manufacturing plant in the Kingdom. Canada also internationally recognized for its strength in healthcare, and that's obvious, of course, which include universal access, medical innovations, high quality research, and advanced clinical and surgical specialization. Recognizing healthcare as one of our country's most important sectors, the Kingdom holds high ambitions in this space, such as aimed at increasing life expectancy from 74 years to 80 years in less than a decade and a half, as well as seeing the sectors contributing to GDP reach $67 billion by 2030. We also put our money where our mouth is by increasing healthcare services to third highest allocation of government spending, with over 17% of the fiscal in 2024. To help realize these ambitions, we seek Canadian expertise in digital health, medical care, education, telemedicine, and advanced healthcare solutions. A sector of strategic importance to us is the ICT, including artificial intelligence and advanced digital solution. Canada's potential role in this domain is well recognized, not only as the first OECD country to launch a national IA strategy in 2017, but also through its recent establishment of AI Strategy Task Force in 2025, aimed to renewing its leadership in resilience and sovereign AI development. Canada home to 5 global innovations clusters, including its scale AI and digital technology super cluster, which are deriving AI integration across supply chain, manufacturing, and ocean technologies. With over 140,000 AI professionals and 10% of the world's top-tier AI researchers, Canada remarks second globally in AI talent indices and leads the G7 in AI-related academic output. These strengths are further reinforced by robust R&D infrastructure and a fervent startup ecosystem and commitment to safe and ethical AI deployment. Okay. The list is long, but I would like really to thank you for the time and for listening. And we have seen what we can offer by the presentation that made by Bassem, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for outlining the remarkable things that are happening in your country and outlining some of the synergies that exist between Canada and Saudi Arabia. And now dessert is served, not here, but it is being served down the hall in the ballroom, otherwise known as the 6 studio, the Toronto 6 studio. So we encourage you to make your way there now. This room is going to be transitioned back into meeting function. So I would ask you to move expeditiously. Coffee, I believe, is being refreshed, but dessert is certainly available. You can also choose a session, I'll just note, at 2:15 that begins in the ballroom where you're going for dessert on the future of food, but otherwise we'll meet back here at 2:30 for an address from Minister Patty Hajdu. Thank you. Well, hello and welcome back, everyone. I hope you are fortified with sugar. I hope you enjoyed the dessert, and we will ensure that the coffee keeps flowing so that all of the information that you're taking in gets to sink in along with a good dose of caffeine. I would like to mention that we have some young special attendees with us in the audience. They're young volunteers from across the City of Toronto. And these individuals are currently attending school, or they've recently graduated, and they're pursuing careers. They're pursuing careers in a variety of fields, including business, nursing, the trades, real estate, culinary arts, hospitality, you name it. We are grateful that they have chosen this city as their place to pursue their future careers. And you're going to see them out in the halls, and some are here in this room, but certainly you'll see them out in the halls. They have white badges, and I'm sure that they would be thrilled if you were to take a moment to make them feel welcome, but also potentially to offer a little bit of career advice or some information that might help them as they kickstart their own professional journeys. And I'd also like to quickly remind you that the Toronto Global Forum is proud to feature an outstanding cultural program throughout all 3 days. Some of you will already have heard some of our performers, but we do have musicians performing in a variety of rooms throughout our time together, and I hope you'll take full advantage of listening to some remarkable artists as you network and chat. And your next opportunity is going to be at the reception later this evening at the end of the session, so we hope that you'll be attending in great numbers. And now we are very fortunate to have with us a longtime Canadian federal minister who is currently Canada's Minister of Jobs and Families and minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Northern Ontario, and that is the Honourable Patty Hajdu. I hope you will give her a warm welcome as she makes her way to stage now.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine, and it's great to hear that there's some youth in the audience. Raise your hands if you're a youth. I guess it depends how we define it. Woo! A lot more of you than I would have thought. I see some bearded faces with their hands up. That's okay. You're youthful at heart. That's fine. It's wonderful to be here with you today, and I do have some colleagues in the audience as well. We have MP Seema Akan from Oakville West. We have Chi Nguyen from Spadina Harbourfront. And we have Leslie Church, Parliamentary Secretary for Labour, Seniors and Children and Youth, which is a lot, here today as well. And I'm just so thrilled to be here with some of my colleagues. I think it's fantastic that you're talking about leading in a time of transformation. And I would say transformation is exactly what Canadians feel that we're going through right now. We're talking a lot about what the future of skills look like, what the future of Canada looks like, what the future of work looks like. And many Canadians are seized with optimism, but I can tell you there are many Canadians that are feeling deeply anxious about what all this transition means. And it makes sense to me because I am also a creature of habit, and although I maybe like change a little bit more than other people, I think that change is really hard for everyone. And it's really hard when you're contemplating it in an industry that's been threatened by tariffs or other trade action, in a sector that's rapidly transforming as a result of digitization, automation, AI. Or if you're working in a sector where you've always worked with your hands, you've always worked with your body, and you're being asked to increasingly use tools that you're not used to using. And if you're in a specific age category where that change might feel extremely difficult. And you might think that by me describing this, I understand a little bit of what those emotions are, and that's true because I come from Thunder Bay, Ontario, and our region has seen its share of heartache as industries have had massive change and in some cases collapse over the last 2 decades. And so as I'm here to give you a message of optimism and a message of hopefully enthusiasm for the work ahead of us as a government in partnership with business, with labor leaders, with organizers, with employment and skills training folks, I also want to be very realistic that part of our job is also ensuring that Canadians can feel that there is a place for them in this transformation and that there is a place for them in the world of work, no matter what their personal circumstances. Across Canada, we have ambition to build faster than we have in generations. As you know, we have launched a number of federal agencies to accelerate the way that we build homes, the way that we build major projects, and the way that we transform the Canadian economy to be faster and better at not only trading with each other, surprising that that's still such a challenging thing to do, but also to be able to trade with other nations in a much more efficient way. We've expanded clean energy grids. We're expanding ports to connect communities. We are rebuilding industrial capacity for the next era of global competition. But to do all that, we need people who are skilled trades workers. Now, you might, those of you who put up your hand and said that you were youth, but maybe were a little bit more bearded, you might remember in the 80s and maybe even before that, just around the 80s, where an entry into the skilled trades was seen as somehow lesser than an entry into university. As a matter of fact, in my day and age, it was competitive. One of the questions that you were asked in grade 11 or 12 by your peers, by other people's parents, by your teachers is what your ambition was. And if people felt that your ambition wasn't high enough, for example, your parents, because you were choosing to think about the trades, you were pushed to reconsider, and to reconsider a role, a pathway that included university. And unfortunately, what that has done, and we've talked about this now for a long time, is it's continued to stigmatize and create a diversion away from highly profitable and highly needed skilled tradespeople across the country. And let me tell you, the skilled trades are evolving. I have a crane operator son, a Red Seal apprentice. He is obviously doing very well financially. But when he describes what it's like to run his crane, I can tell you that it includes the kinds of technical skills that I know I certainly don't have, and something that is really kind of rivals other technological jobs. And so we've done our youth, I think, a giant disservice by discouraging this pathway into the skilled trades, and we've actually hobbled our capacity to build things quickly. I'm working closely with the labor organizations and with the major projects office to make sure that we can actually align the labor across this country, create better pathways for skills mobility, but that will not solve the problem. And so this will take a concerted effort to continue to invest in attracting people to the trades, but even more than that, to keeping people in the trades. I also want to talk a little bit about the Future Skills Center. Now, some of you might know about the Future Skills Center in this audience. I'm looking at Leslie, who's smiling at me because I think she was working in a different capacity when the Future Skills Center was launched. In 2018, the federal government realized that the world of work was changing rapidly, but we also knew that government is often not the best player to figure out what kinds of skills are going to be required. And so we launched the Future Skills Center. It was hundreds of millions of dollars to provide an independent center the ability to invest in skills training, to take some chances, to innovate and to pilot how we can actually create skills trades. And now the center is a critical bridge between government and business. It translates the labor market change that we're seeing in practical training. It's one of the ways that we move from anxiety to adaptability, turning disruption into design. And that's what protection looks like in an economy like ours, giving the people the tools that they need to be ready and not just safe. It also looks like some of the transformation that we've been approaching on EI. Now, I know that employment insurance is probably not everyone's favorite topic in this room, but I can tell you that just getting out of the car and talking to one of the officials at ESDC, using a tool like work sharing to its full capacity is a huge asset for employers that are struggling. As transition happens, as shocks happen, especially in large employers, oftentimes what happens is there's a period of shutdown. I'm probably telling you things you know, and employers lose those valuable employees through the inability to keep them attached to the workforce. And so preparing for the kinds of shocks that we were seeing with the increased trade and tariff activity, We've modernized AI to ensure that, first of all, people can keep their earnings immediately. There's no holdback. That employers can apply for and receive work sharing to lighten the payroll load while giving a bit of breathing room to transition, to train the workers for new opportunities, and also to ensure that those employees stay attached to their workforce. Because, as you would all know, when you lose your workforce, and if you try to restart, many times those skilled employees have gone elsewhere, and it is a huge productivity hit to any organization that's trying to restart. We also are really having quite a tangible and I would say intense conversation in this country about AI. Now, artificial intelligence isn't coming. I would say it's here. Another little skill pop testing question. How many of you have used some form of artificial intelligence, maybe ChatGPT, today? Holy man. Well, I won't even go through last week or the month before. I can tell you my husband had a great summer. He's retired. He used ChatGPT to design a sauna and build it for his daughter at her camp. You Southerners call it cottages. And he would like me to tell everyone that it is WET certified. So anyone out there who knows what that means will know that that's a big endeavor. But this is a 66-year-old man who's used a tool that he never had before and was able to design and build a structure without visiting the library once, without visiting a specific designer once, and using AI. And I tell that story because it's kind of an extreme example. But when I talk to young people or professionals all across this country, they are increasingly using AI. And I can also say that it's in hospitals, it's in construction sites, it's in financial systems, it's in classrooms. My doctor recently asked me on a virtual visit, which is absolutely the best, if she could use AI to record our conversation. I asked her a little bit about it. I was interested in knowing what that would do. First of all, it charts for her, but more than that, it actually detects patterns where she is unable to. So it manages to pull out the relevant information about what I'm saying, different symptoms, different parts of the story of our conversation, and give her a better ability to detect symptoms. So it's here. And in order to ensure that we are able to harness this tool and build on the productivity, the Conference Board of Canada estimates that generative AI could add nearly 2% to GDP. We have to ensure that people have the skills to be able to use it. So that means upskilling workers now, not after disruption happens. It means that companies invest in training so that technology adaptation can grow productivity and paychecks. And it means designing systems that make work safer, not more precarious. And I think this is where business, government, and labor can work together. Government is a powerful tool for convening, for investing in systems. Businesses bring the innovation and the job design, and workers show us and evolve the real-world application of those tools. I can tell you that it's also deeply worrying and creating some of the labor instability that we're seeing. Now, I do want to encourage everyone that 97% of federal labor disputes are solved between parties in collective agreements. But there are those 3% that go sideways. We have federal mediation services that work deeply with those organizations and their unions. But recently, and I would say even prior to my new role as Jobs and Families, I've been hearing from union members in particular something a bit new. It's quite typical to have a conversation in labor negotiations about wages and safety and pensions and security. But the change that I'm hearing is the fear around automation, the fear around digitization. And so we've been contemplating how we can actually support some of those conversations. And I think you all have a huge role in this room in helping us understand how we ensure that workers in sectors that are highly prone to disruption have the support that they need to feel confident that there's a future for them in those sectors. Finally, I want to just say that we have obviously some flashing signs in our economy that are worrisome. We've got a rising unemployment rate. We've got a youth unemployment rate, the likes of which we haven't seen in a long time. It's not equal, by the way. There's much higher unemployment in the 15 to 20-year-old category. It drops down a bit between 20 and 25. But nonetheless, these flashing red lights are something that we all need to take very serious note of. I would also say, though, that it's uneven and that there are areas where we're really searching for people and for workers. And so the solutions that we arrive at together are going to be deeply informed by all of you. I'm thrilled that Prime Minister Carney has tasked me to move more quickly on something that many of you have advocated for years, something called work sector alliances, such a boring name, but really to ensure that the sectors that are seeking talent are aligned better with the kinds of skills training that's being developed and delivered across the country. And I think that that closer skills match is going to help ensure that people have the confidence and the tools that they need to seize the opportunities, to grow companies, to create jobs, and to help us all through this challenging time. We also have a huge untapped asset of underemployed folks. And I'm looking at Leslie. She's been doing a phenomenal job on the file of people with disabilities, meeting people with disabilities and hearing about their level of education, their ambition, their desire to be fully included, and then meeting with employers who thoughtfully and intentionally choose to hire people with disabilities is a real aha moment for me as a politician and as an individual. That when you put that effort into ensuring that people who haven't been given the chance to fully participate, that comes back to you, both in revenue, but also in the ability to continue to grow and innovate. When we hire and when we include people that have a different life journey, that have a different way of looking at the world, there's all kinds of hidden benefits. So the path forward is clear. We need to, of course, build the homes and the industries and the technologies that define our future. We need to protect workers by investing in skills development on and off job sites. And we need to empower every generation to see themselves in that future, confident, capable, and included. Now, Canada is not a stranger to uncertain times, and many of you are from regions that have experienced very uncertain times. But we've always built through that uncertainty, and I am confident that we can do it now. Because to build faster, to protect ourselves and our communities and each other, and to empower our Canadian young people more fully, we absolutely need to believe in each other. And we need to pull together, now more than ever, with the sole focus of building Canada strong. I've never felt prouder to be a Canadian, to be honest. This summer in the grocery stores, as people were comparing what to buy, as people try to ensure that they're buying Canadian, as people fight for their sectors, for their families, and for the regions. This is a time where I see Canadians pulling together, and I'm just really proud to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to Minister Hajdu for being here with us today. She touched on a number of important topics and shared a little bit about the innovative work that's being done by her government, particularly with regards to skills and skills development, and on topics that are important to each of us in this room on a personal and professional level, but also to our kids. So a pleasure to have her here with us. Now, just before we move along, I'd like to briefly mention that we have a number of bronze partners whose logos you're going to see throughout the forum, and our thanks to those partners for their generosity. And speaking of partners, many of you may have noticed and may have heard me mention that we have a strong South African presence here at the Toronto Global Forum. I'm not sure if any of our South African visitors are here in the audience with us, but I'll tell you why I'm asking this, because given what's going on here in Toronto, I decided to do a little bit of research, and now I'm going to provide you with some cocktail information for later today. So, I found out that in 2017, the Toronto Blue Jays signed shortstop and second baseman Gift Ngope, who was the first South African to reach the major leagues. There you go. You're welcome. I have made a tie that you can all talk about now when you're watching the game later tonight, or drowning your sorrows, whatever the case may be. Okay, now we are going to turn our attention back to our sessions in this room, and it is my great pleasure to introduce two men who are longtime contributors to IEFA events, and we're delighted to have them back. A very engaging fireside chat is up next between Borje Ekholm, the CEO of Ericsson, and Stephen Lunn, the CEO of Toronto Global, and they are going to make their way to the stage after these partner messages.
Good afternoon. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome. First of all, let me start off by saying, Nick, congrats to you and your team for a great job. This is number 19. I'm curious, this is the 19th session. How many people here have been to more than one session, Toronto Global Forum? Okay, more than half. That's a great testament to your great success, Nick. I'm Stephen Lunn, CEO of Toronto Global. We work with companies around the world to help attract them to the Toronto region, and mostly in the tech sector. As you know, Toronto is the fastest growing tech center in North America, center for AI, and all things technology. We're thrilled today to be joined by Borje Ekholm, the CEO of Ericsson. I think people know Ericsson. It is one of the biggest players in the world in the connectivity space. 100,000 employees, over 50,000 patents, and they had a fantastic Q3 results with a massive jump in stock for all you stockholders out there. So we're thrilled today. Before we get going, Borje, let me ask a quick question. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me and having me back. So last time can't have been too disastrous. Anyhow, yeah, tell me about myself. I'm actually a resident in the US, so I live in Colorado. But I'm CEO of a Swedish company, so it gets to be a bit of commute. Most people complain about an hour's commute. I have a bit longer. So we live up in the mountains in Colorado, actually. And the reason for that, you can always ask, was I used to be CEO of another company before, and then I decided to retire. And where else could you be when you retire up in the mountains, right? I kind of love the mountains. I failed at retirement, and that's when I got back to working as a CEO again. Now it's about 9 years ago. But we're still residents up there. 4 kids, they're in the mid-20s. They are all spread out over the US. 3 of them actually work in what I would call tech. and 1 in hospitality. But they're in San Francisco, 1 in Denver, and 2 in New York City.
And twins.
Twins as well, yeah. No, we wanted a third, and we got a bonus issue.
Yeah, bonus. Okay, I have a bunch of questions here. I'm going to apologize in advance to your team, Borji. I'm going to pivot a bit halfway through and ask some questions that I think the audience would really appreciate hearing. But let's start with a few questions. Number one, tell us about your operations in Canada.
Canada for us is actually a very big operation. We have about 3,000, mostly or almost only in R&D or R&D related. So for us, this is one of the key hubs for Ericsson as a company globally. And it's in the front runner technologies. It's 5G, it's 6G, it's Cloud RAN, it's AI, it's quantum compute. So we have a strong base, and I think it's worthwhile sometimes to reflect of the history. Canada has a very strong tradition in telecom. And that's actually an ecosystem that we're tapping into. So if you look at universities, you look at collaborations between government and enterprises, it's very strong here. And that's created a strong bond for us. And you may have seen just today, we signed an agreement with EDC, a big partnership agreement. That's of course important to also promote investments in Canada and technology companies in Canada. So a special thank you to Alison Nankivel, who drove that on the EDC side. But it's really important for us.
So, congratulations. I saw Allison earlier. If you hear Allison, put your hand up. Congratulations on a great partnership that you just signed with your team. So question on, if you were looking today to expand in a greenfield operation, talk about what you would consider in your decision-making process.
Yeah, that's a great question. The only thing you know when you do...
It's your question. I'm just reading it back that you gave me. Yeah. Sorry.
It's my team's question.
Your team's question.
That's why it's good. No, I think of this as, the classic way to look at it. You always need to factor in market size, growth, profit pool, competition, etc. But I think there are a couple of more subtle factors you need to look at. I often say the first one, do I have the right team and the right leaders? Because the only thing I know is if I don't have the right team and leaders, it will not succeed anyway. It may still not succeed if you have the right people, but it's a prerequisite. So that has to be there. I also look at, I call it disruptive. You have to be disruptive in your approach. You can't go into something new and have 5 to 10% benefit. You need kind of a 5x benefit. When you have that, then you have something to deal with, to start with. Then you can negotiate from there, so to say, but at least you can disrupt the market. And I often say the last one is, do you have the runway or the timeline to make it a success? Almost all ventures will go a bit slower than you think, require more capital than you think. So you need to be prepared for it to take time. Do you have that time? So if you're an entrepreneur and don't have the time, and you run out of resources halfway, it's not going to be great. And even if you're an established company, I think about us, fixed wireless access, for example, is probably the first use case of 5G. It's been in the works for more than 10 years. So if you have only, call it stamina for 5, you're not going to see it through. So make sure you can have all of it.
Is there an area of the world now that you're considering going into that you have not been in before?
We're pretty much in every country except Iran, Myanmar, North Korea.
Maybe not the best places right now.
I don't see those as opportunities.
So here's a question I've just thought of. So Ericsson, major company all over the world. Is there something about Ericsson that most people might not know?
Yeah, we don't make phones anymore.
You don't make phones anymore, right? What else in terms of lines of business might surprise people?
I mean, we're a relatively focused company. We're in mobile infrastructure, wireless infrastructure, so we provide that across the world. We're in We're pretty much with people on the ground in 170 countries. So we're, you know, if you ever run into an issue, I don't think you should call the Canadian embassy locally. Call the Ericsson office, because we're more likely to have people there.
Well, take a note of that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. We hear all the time AI, AI, AI. Toronto is the Canadian Centre for AI. It's a world center, godfather of AI here. Two-part question. How is AI impacting your business, number one? And two, talk about regulation, because I know I've seen you talk a bit before about comparing the US, for example, with Europe.
Yeah.
You know, maybe in those two-part question.
Yeah, if we start with AI, I mean, everybody talks right now if it's a bubble or not, and maybe it's a bubble. That's the financial markets. But I think from a real technology point of view, we're probably only in the first or second inning. So we're really early in that game. And I think most of the value we're going to see going forward is just about to be created. You know, today we talk a lot about the plumbing, the infrastructure, in a way similar to what we saw in the 90s and early 2000s about the internet. Right? There was a lot of focus on building that infrastructure. The reality is the value of the infrastructure comes on top. And the value of AI is going to be the same. It's going to come those that actually exploit and create the applications that leverage the technology. So the way we think about AI is first of all, we need to prepare the networks for AI. What will the networks of the future demand? We think it's going to be low latency, it's going to be high uplink, it will be many more connected devices. So we see prepare the networks first of all, and because this is going to start driving traffic. Honestly, I don't think the smartphone will survive another decade. We have to get used to other form factors, going to be glasses, going to be other handheld devices that aren't necessarily a smartphone. It's not pretty smart to go looking like this when you're out walking, right? So I think there is a lot to do there. So we see traffic will be shaped in the future by AI. The next one is when we look, future networks will have to be autonomous. They're getting so complicated already today. They will need to migrate to be fully automated, fully autonomous. That will require AI. It will not be doable otherwise. So that's going to be there. Then we see, you know, in the way we operate internally, it's for, call it internal efficiency, etc. We see quite a lot of benefit here already. So we do about a third of our code base is today developed with AI. That's just the beginning. It will get more. We see it on administrative processes. You can do quite a lot on the way you know, simple things like T&E. When you monitor that and check that, you can use AI. It's a lot of efficiency gain. So I do think it will mean, in that sense, and I think the minister kind of hinted at that also, job losses. But I will also say there will be a lot of new jobs created. We just don't see them right now. But we expect to see quite a lot when we leverage AI out in the applications. Then regulation, that's a long discussion. But let me start out by saying, you know, if there is one thing that is clear is when you go lead with regulation, you get into a problem. So if you take the European approach, for example, Europe has tried to regulate several sectors. And when you try to regulate something, you don't know what's going to happen. You need to cover everything. So you look at the AI regulation in Europe, for example, it becomes a wet blanket for innovation. So we struggle. What type of products can we develop in Europe? Because you get one Brussels directive, and then it's implemented in 27 different ways below. So it's actually created you know, I call it hinders companies' development. it becomes a big friction cost. And then when I compare that to the US approach, which is actually the opposite end of the spectrum, it's deregulating. And if I, as a business person, have the choice to choose between, do I invest in a country where they have regulated all my activities or where it's deregulated, I will any day of the week go to the one that's deregulated. So I think here there is a real choice that governments have to make and regulators have to make. If I want to have forward-leaning innovation, new companies grow up, etc., I need to think about the regulatory environment and actually deregulate.
Speaking of regulation.
At least I got somebody that liked it.
There you go. Speaking of regulation, talk about China.
Talk about China.
How does it impact your business?
It's the no, it's in the middle of the universe. You know their symbol, right? No, the reality is China. You know, we need to figure out a way to deal with China. I call it that because there are so many dependencies today. In supply chains, in different parts, you know, just critical minerals is one thing, but there are other dependencies as well. So we all need to figure out a way to collaborate. That I want to say first. So I think that's important. The other part is we need to also recognize China is a big market. It's all of that, but it's also a very capable country. So you look at the number of engineers, STEM majors that graduate in China, it's an order of magnitude compared to the rest of the world. Their investments into the digital infrastructure is much bigger than anywhere else in the world. And we're starting to see that come together now. So China, in a way, is starting to create a fully sovereign digital stack, which actually will consist of all layers in the stack. And they're already rolling that out. So if you think about AI, for example, actually they can today roll it out to the edge, which means that you're starting to see applications come up. So think about 3D or drone control is one area. Inline, what you call it, kind of inspection. Is today rolled out in China. You see robots, self-guided vehicles, where you put the processing power centrally and run a very cheap robot at the edge. That you can do, exists there. So when you start to look, they have created an ecosystem that will be formidable for productivity development. And we need to kind of both tap into that, but also start to think, how do we compete? How do we create an allied stack? We need to think about how do we create that ecosystem? How do we build, you know, we can't go at it alone. It's not a single country outside of China that actually can create a sovereign stack. I would even say this nonsense of talking about sovereign that you hear in Europe sometimes, sovereign this, sovereign that, it's just mumbo jumbo. Because nobody can do it. We need the US, we need, I would say I count Ericsson almost as Canada, but Canada, Europe, because the connectivity in the US comes predominantly from Ericsson and Nokia. So, you know, the dependencies are here. We just need to work together. And if we work together, I'm a firm believer we will drive an innovative ecosystem. But if we try to go alone all the time, it's not going to work.
Care to comment on tariffs impact?
Yeah. Which day?
Yeah. Stay tuned. Let me check my phone.
Or my tweet. No, we actually early on created a fairly global footprint. So we have factories kind of spread out, including building a factory in the US. I wouldn't say we saw this coming, but we saw the geopolitical tensions coming already 5, 6, 7 years ago. So we built a big factory there. It's fully automated. It's actually a green factory. We use only sustainable energy sources, etc. So it's actually a little bit of a showcase. Has a lot of automation. So we use our global footprint to balance the effects of tariffs. So far, it's been manageable. Of course, we don't know how the future is going to look like. But I often tell my colleagues that, you know, I don't think tariffs are going away short term. You know, we have to get used to it and act accordingly.
What is the view internationally, you think, these days of Canada? I mean, you're sort of straddling Sweden and U.S., you know, you travel a lot.
I think Canada is actually has a very favorable view. For good reasons, to be honest. You're a resource-rich country. You have a lot of good energy sources. And that's going to, by the way, be important in AI. So I do think that is strong. You have a good education system, well-educated people in general, very good. So I would say Canada is one of those countries with the most positive notations to it. My only worry is you look a bit too much to Europe and become, you know, a European-type country. That is not positive, because if you look at Europe, I mean, you have to be a bit self-critical when you're in Europe, right? You know, the Europe and the US used to have the same size of economy 10, 12 years ago. Today, the US is 30 to 40% bigger. And it's because Europe doesn't have a tech industry. It really is the tech that's the difference. America got ahead in tech and sailing on a strong ship here. Europe did not. So growth in Europe have been lackluster for more than a decade. And I think it's part of that is the regulatory environment, it's the capital market, it's you know, the way the country operates or continent operates. So don't mimic that.
What about, if not Europe, what about Asia, like different parts of Asia these days?
Yeah, I was in Singapore just recently, and I was thinking about Malaysia, Thailand, and India, by the way. I'm a big, the entrepreneurship we're seeing in that part of the world is second to none. And I think the one interesting country is actually India. Look at the growth in India. India is today one of the most digitalized countries on the planet. And it's actually digitalized based on 4G. So they got a very good 4G coverage much earlier than any other country in Asia. And today they have, I would say most, if not all payments are basically digital in India today. So India is actually on the forefront, and I do my own mother-in-law research, as I call it. When you land at Mumbai or Delhi or in Bangalore, and you take a taxi from the airport to the city center, you can have a Teams call or a Zoom call uninterrupted. If I try the same thing at a European capital, it does not work.
Bangalore Airport, built by Canadians, brand new.
Ah, see.
Yeah, there you go. Question on, I mean, you're a global CEO, and as you said, on many, many countries around the world. You're in the U.S., Sweden, back and forth, not every day, but, and I know your family's all in the U.S. Two-part question. What gets you excited to get up now that you're retired and didn't work? What excites you every day when you get up? And secondly, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, you know, when you have 4 kids, I often say that you're never happier than your least happy child. So I think that with 4, you kind of increases the odds that you will have somebody that's unhappy. So that's one thing that keeps me up. But if I look at what I actually think we live in a very exciting time. I'm really excited about what we see ahead of us. I do think AI will fundamentally change the way we work in society. That will have, of course, a lot of demands, but it's a lot of opportunities. The technology development we're seeing now is unbelievable. And I'm a big believer that technology is actually a force for good. So I think that's what drives me. It's that excitement of seeing what comes next. What keeps me up at night, I would probably have to say it's geopolitics. You know, I must say that when I went to school, you know, geopolitics was not really a topic. So we never thought about geopolitics. We thought, you know, either it was the Cold War, and when that stopped, we said, okay, now it's not, you don't need to think about it. I do think it's highly relevant for business. And that's what you can lose sleep over. So when you start to think about how does your supply chain look like actually, where is, you know, you may buy from a Western company or a European company, but ultimately where is it sourced? What are your dependencies throughout that supply chain? That, to me, is one of the bigger topics.
Well, geopolitics, I have another 48 questions that would take the next 3 hours, but we're out of time. So final question. First of all, thank you very much, everybody. I have a final question, so important these days. You live in Colorado. The Avalanche have two amazing Canadian hockey players, Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar. You're from Sweden. Who was the best Swedish hockey player of all time?
You know, I think you have an important game coming up tonight. I am actually a Yankees fan, so I have to remember that. No, anyhow, you're such a good team. The Jays, I think they will beat Seattle tonight. But my favorite hockey player, and I think best of all time, is actually Börje Salming.
All right. Good leave. All right, good answer. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. Go Jays. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. That was an excellent conversation, and always a little bit of fun mixed in, too. So the minister, Patty Hajdu, was talking about the fact that everyone in this room really has in some way interacted with AI over the course of the day. In fact, I would venture to guess that most of us haven't, in fact, noticed that we were interacting with AI when in fact we are. So that's going to be the topic of the next conversation that we're embarking on, but with a little bit of a twist. And I am absolutely delighted to introduce Philippe Gervais, who is the Vice President in the Office of the Vice President of Communications and Institutional Relations with McGill University. We're delighted to have him here, and he's going to provide a little bit more context. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Just start off that if you guys were at home right now and watching a movie on Netflix, and I'm here to introduce the panel, so you'd probably be going skip intro. Let's get straight to the show. But unfortunately, that's not how it's going to work today. I'd like to begin by thanking Garda World for sponsoring this panel and the forum for convening it. Garda World has built an international reputation for helping organizations navigate complex risks. These are exactly the kind of environments where artificial intelligence is already being deployed. Places where speed, accuracy are valuable, but where trust, human judgment, and resilience remain indispensable. Their presence today is a reminder that AI adoption is never only about technology. It is about applying new tools in real-world contexts, where oversight and accountability are essential. The question posed by this panel are important. Around the world, organizations are piloting AI applications, but finding it difficult to scale them. The barriers often lie less in the algorithms themselves and more on governance, infrastructure, and the leadership that is required to integrate them effectively. If AI is to generate the productivity gains that economists predict, these organizational challenges must be addressed with the same urgency as the technical ones. Canada has developed a distinctive ecosystem that is national in scope and collaborative by design. From Vector here in Toronto to Mila in Montreal to emerging clusters in Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver, we see a network that connects discovery and practice. For us at McGill University, it's part of our ecosystem. It is deeply we are deeply engaged in projects that span healthcare, national security, sustainability, and education, often in collaboration with partners in industry and government. What distinguishes this Canadian model is the emphasis on industry partnerships. Universities and research universities like McGill can advance methods and algorithms, but it is through collaboration with business that these ideas are tested, refined, scaled, and eventually commercialized. Recent partnerships have demonstrated that some of the greatest productivity gains come not from the most eye-catching applications, but from improvements in logistics, predictive maintenance, and back-office processes that strengthen competitive across the entire sectors. These efforts are tied to broader networks like Mila that I've mentioned earlier, which has become one of the world's largest machine learning research centers and is a focal point for collaboration between researchers and companies. The lesson is clear. The productivity curve in AI will not rise simply because technology advances. It will depend on leadership choices, on governance frameworks, on building that public trust and collaboration that bridges research and practice. Canada's ecosystem, with institutions working alongside each other and many others, show that collaboration can be structured. This is why today's discussion is so valuable. So thank you for the opportunity to make these opening remarks. And on that, I'll turn it over to Charting the AI Productivity Curve, What's Real and What's Next panel. Thank you.
Already higher. Reaction to the stock of $29 billion of market cap improvement.
Are you investing because you actually have a strong conviction around what that ROIC will be, or is this a way with you?
In a world flooded with data and competing signals, clarity is power. Out of the noise emerges IEFA President's Brief. Driven by Crisis 24's global intelligence, empowered by Palantir's advanced AI. Leaders gain foresight to identify risks, seize opportunities, and forge decisive outcomes, bringing state-level intelligence to titans of global business. Empowering leaders who shape the future.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeffrey Hills, and I am the Managing Director of Crisis 24 IEFA. It's an honor to be here both in Toronto and at the IEFA conference. We just saw a video played. The product IEFA is something we had the privilege of launching just last week. It represents an exciting partnership between GardaWorld and Palantir. IEFA is a platform where AI now allows us to replicate and model the most elite levels of intelligence, once reserved for heads of state. IEFA's presidential brief aims to deliver with speed, accuracy, relevance, and make the type of anticipatory intelligence and foresight available to the most senior ranks of private sector business. As we discuss the impacts of AI on productivity, I thought IEFA represents a timely and unique example of that. I will be moderating today's panel, and I'll ask my esteemed colleagues to introduce themselves, starting with Farley.
Hello, my name is Farley. I'm representing here Stefanini Group. I'm a Brazilian. I'm living here in US, and we are a tech consulting company. We provide services for companies that are looking for software and everything else.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me today. My name is Aaron Harris. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Sage. Sage is a global leader in accounting, finance, people, payroll, software, in the cloud. Really excited to be part of this conversation today.
And hello, I'm Ansel Stein. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Crisis 24 IA, and had the pleasure of leading the team that built the prototype, and excited to talk about it today and hear from you all.
Bonjour à tous. Nice to see you all. Marjorie Jenowitz, Global Head of Revenue at Mistral AI. We build large language models and AI systems for the enterprise.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So as we start, across all of your respective sectors, which AI use cases are delivering real, measurable, and productivity gains today? And which ones are providing potential for being overhyped? Marjorie, let's start with you. Mistral represents a new generation of open-weight, European-born AI models. From your perspective, what's driving the next wave of enterprise adoption, model performance, openness, or customization?
Yeah, so from our side, we see quite a bit of use cases that are starting to drive really great value for the enterprise and public sectors alike. We see use cases that are very much ingrained in the concept of workflow automation, where it's very important to connect those AI systems with the DNA of your enterprise, your systems, your complex tools, and adapt that really to those AI systems. So I think I heard in the prior video, we also see a lot of use cases in financial services and logistics around the concept of workflow automation. Then we see quite a bit on the topic of R&D and things that are pushing a little bit the frontier, building large language models that understand your culture, understand a specific language, to make sure that once it's time to launch it to citizens or to employees, it's very useful. So examples of that could be, we built a Southeast Asian language for the Department of Home Affairs in Singapore. And then finally, we see quite a bit of use cases that are directly correlated to employee and developer productivity, particularly in countries for which sovereignty and independence in AI is important. Being able to deploy those systems on-premise to keep the data home is also a series of use cases we see quite often. So for us, really, the key to adoption is the ability to adapt and adopt really the models and customize the models to your context, to the enterprise context, to make it useful and that bridge the gap very nicely between a failed proof of concepts and actually systems that are going to production.
Great, thank you. Farley, you work across hundreds of large enterprise clients globally. What patterns are emerging among companies that are successfully operationalizing AI, especially in legacy-heavy environments?
Well, what we see ultimately, all the companies that are focusing on training people, by nature, people are scared about innovation and changes. So we see companies adopting a lot of trainings, not just led by IT, but coming even from HR programs. This is one aspect that is helping companies to move on. The second aspect that is really relevant, they are building in parallel of the actual daily activities that the people are running on all the companies. They have divisions and teams. They build their teams internally most of the time together with some partners, because it's impossible to learn everything that is happening. The speed of change and improvements is so fast right now. They have partners helping them, and they build in parallel organizations to support the teams daily. So the people, instead of doing all their activities or trying to figure out how to use any AI tools, they have a full organization helping them in parallel to make sure that they don't get disturbed or they don't stop doing their own activities. This is the second aspect. The third one is the most challenging one. All this AI transformation, the most tricky part is everything related to change management. That's not easy. people, like I said before, they are always trying to avoid changes, and that is the most concerning part in all the companies. The companies that are managing better these changes, they are evolving faster than the others.
Thank you. Aaron, from your vantage point in accounting and finance, how is AI changing day-to-day productivity for small and medium-sized businesses? And are we past the experimentation stage?
Yeah, great question, and one that I love to talk about. We've actually been building AI for several years now, and we see that we've been going through phases or waves of AI adoption. The first of those waves being what we call task-based AI. So if you take a step back and look at, who do we sell to? We sell to a CFO, we sell to finance leaders, and they have a lot of work that I call sort of non-negotiable, but nevertheless low value. They have to process invoices, they have to pay vendors, they've got to get the payroll done, and they can't choose to forego a potential acquisition or new product launch, or they can't choose to not close the books because they'd rather spend time doing something like that. And so the real promise of AI and where we're seeing real measurable impact is AI that tackles this non-negotiable repetitive work. So AI that can process an invoice, that can classify transactions, reconcile bank accounts, look for anomalies in a large pool of data. I was joking with Marjorie early today that accounting software is actually not super exciting to a lot of people, but it's very sexy to a data scientist and AI engineer because there is so much highly structured data that customers actually label for you. And so we've made huge progress in accounting. And I guess what I would finish with here is CFOs, unfortunately, are often measured by how productive their teams are. And one of the big measures is how quickly they can get the books closed every month. And so when we started building AI 4 or 5, 6 years ago, they were taking 2 to 3 weeks to get the books closed, right? So they only had a week of freedom before they had to start the process over again. If you talk to companies now that are really adopting AI to tackle that non-negotiable work, they're getting their books closed in 2 or 3 days, and they're able to spend their time on that more strategic work.
Great, thank you. Ansel, what is Aya, and why focus on decision quality and time to action?
Yeah, and actually I want to build off of what Aaron said, which is about sort of closing your books quickly. And I think what Aya enables companies to do, what it's designed to do, is bring the methodologies from the intelligence community, typically reserved for heads of state or sort of diplomats, and to understand the world and make decisions off of it, and to automate as many of those as possible to sort of supercharge human capacity. And I think that's what you're kind of getting at, is if you can get a team to do their required work in 2 or 3 days versus a month, the rest of that time is available for the thing that requires the really deep human thought. And so I think what we're trying to do with Aya is take sort of the grunt work of research and other things and prepare intelligence versus just information to the leader, inform the leader. And we envision this sort of scene around a table where everybody comes prepared to discuss not what happened, but what the company should do about it. How do we take steps to seize the opportunity that this global event is presenting to us? Or how do we mitigate the risk? And it's not just risk management. That is one thing I will say is different from my career in the intelligence community. I sometimes joke that the teams I led, successfully predicted 13 of 3 actual crises. Business can't take that approach, right? You have to sort of try and find the opportunity there and can't just focus on the bad. So, supercharging our humans who are in there to make good decisions with rigor and intelligence and seize the opportunity.
One of the topics top of mind for AI is growth and scaling. Once an organization has a proof of concept, scaling is oftentimes the hardest step. What are the biggest bottlenecks you see in data integration, governance, or organization culture? Aaron, let's start with you. Sage serves millions of business users. How are you embedding responsible AI principles, transparency, explainability into tools that non-technical professionals can use daily?
Yeah, so there's a couple dimensions to this, and I think what I would start with is what research has shown us is the biggest barrier to adopting AI is trust. And there's a lot of facets to that. But what we then learned was that the biggest signal to a potential buyer of AI, of trust, is the brand behind the AI. And so the first step in really building AI that customers choose and are willing to use is actually being a respectable company that has values and principles and are not shy about publishing those. And so if you go to our website, you'll find several videos of me talking about the values that guide us in the way that we build AI. And it all ends with hopefully a memorable quote from me. It's essentially that we will never use AI in a way that erodes your trust in Sage or our products. Right, both the brand and the products behind the brand. So I'll tell you one more story there that gets to the heart of the matter, though. So we have to have the brand that's reliable and trusted, but then the product's got to work in a way that really reinforces trust. So when we first built Sage Copilot, which is our conversational AI assistant, I was playing around with an early version of it. It was a version that we deploy into our small business product, and I asked it a very simple question. I said, "What is my cash balance?" And it very curtly answered, "Your cash balance is 0. And that was it. And I knew the answer was wrong. So I went back to the engineers and the designer and I said, "Hey, what's going on here?" And they explained to me, well, actually, the answer was correct because your petty cash balance, in other words, the cash you have on hand, is 0. So we had this conversation about trying to understand and infer meaning from questions. And so when they did the work to sort of fix the experience for me, I asked again, it said again, "Your cash balance is 0, but you may have been asking what is the accumulated balance across all of your bank accounts. In that case, here's a table that shows your accounts and their balances, and you can click on the links to get more detail." And today, in that same conversational interface, we go one step further. So we allow you to open up an analysis tab and a background tab where we show you the reasoning that our agents took to answer the question. We actually show you the API endpoints, the agentic endpoints that it took. And so we sort of err a little bit, maybe too much on transparency, but that's kind of the point. Last thing really quickly, we did also just launch a trust label. So within our products, if you're making a decision about whether you want to use a capability powered by AI, there's a label that'll tell you how we built it, how we secure the data, how we're training the models, whether they're our models or somebody else's models, so you can make that decision with full transparency about it.
Maybe to piggyback on that, I think on the topic of trust, I think that's why the concept of open source models is also very essential. I mean, in the end, if all our businesses are running on closed source models, we don't even really know what's going behind it. Mistral decided to go the open source route to give really the power and the control back to the enterprise to understand a little bit more what's going on and being controlling a little bit the guardrailing behind those models. So I love what you said. Yeah.
Well, Aaron, as a fan of Sage, I'm glad to hear your cash balance isn't 0. Ansel, delivering AI-driven insights to boards and C-suites, how do you build trust and explainability?
So I'll piggyback a little bit and say, yes, a lot of it is transparency about argumentation. Very early on in our program, we decided to sort of hinge on what are called ICD 203 and 206, which are the standards from the U.S. government for sourcing, transparency, and analytic tradecraft. And I think, I often say to our team, we are beginning and end basically in the trust business. And if you violate that trust, it takes a long time to build it back up. The other thing we do is we try and not, or we prompt to not be policy prescriptive. So we're not saying, buy gold now. We are saying businesses that do X probably will be insulated from Y risk and lay out very clearly the why with, as I say, with rigor and with tradecraft.
Thank you, Ansel. Farley, as a global IT integrator, how are you helping your clients modernize data infrastructure and governance frameworks so that AI projects won't stall in the pilot stage?
Well, that's a very, very catching question. Most of the companies nowadays and governments, etc., they have the data. They have a lot of data. Most of them are, in most of the cases, crappy data. You need to really clean it up. We need to bring them together. They have a lot of different databases for different products, and from providing the data that you need to really work on that. But that's the beauty I see nowadays with the AI, for having and to make sure that you can really use the data, you need to have a very clean and accurate data. This is one aspect. How you can get there, you can use already AI to really organize the data, to bring them together. We know that the dream is to have all the data in one place. That's not going to happen immediately. We are going to have different systems, so we need to integrate the data. And AI is a very powerful tool to help you to organize all this data. On top of that, once you have the data organized, you can use even all the other tools that are exploring the AI capabilities to really take the best information that you need from there. So infrastructure is at the beginning. You see on the news, all the data centers they are working on right now, that is going to be just to provide the right environment for all the data that is coming. More and more the companies are understanding that the data must be good for using AI tools. So we are going to reshape the data since the beginning on the right way. So the way that we are providing and supporting the companies most of the time, we believe always that is the extensive use of AI, but we need to go one step before to make sure that you have the data that is accurate to explore that tools as well.
Thank you. Marjorie, Mr. All has emphasized both ethical AI and open innovation. How do you balance openness with a need for commercial grade reliability and compliance?
Yeah, so of course, like we said a little bit earlier, I think open source is just a great way to create that transparency, but also that flexibility to adapt those models to your context, whether it's a cultural context, a language context, or a domain context. I think that's the first step. But I think what we've also learned over the past couple of years, because Mistral started 2 years after some of the big players, we've learned what doesn't necessarily work in some real life use cases that we've seen enterprise face. What's needed now is beyond just the models. The models have mostly all been trained on the internet. It means that they all understand more or less the same thing. What matters now is injecting your IP, your data. Of course, that data stays home, but making those systems your own, which, by the way, on the topic of data, a lot of your businesses in Canada have strong IP around data. You have an opportunity to create really gigantic moats around that data and competitive advantages leveraging AI. What's needed now is a little bit the stack that goes on top of the models, the products that are going to be able to turn really those brains into workflows that are being automated. And this is a complete technology stack. So I think to go back to your question, openness and open source is great for adoption, for trust, and for de-risking AI. But what's needed after that is really the technology stack that's really adapted to the enterprise context. And then I do think deploying solutions in AI is very different to what we have all done over the past 20 years. The concept of applied science and applied engineering that connects the dots between the technology and then the use cases you all have on the day-to-day basis is quite essential. And what we are trying to do in Canada and more broadly is connecting those dots between the technology, the models, but also the applied work that needs to take place for AI to be successful in a business.
Great. As Marjorie talked a little bit about what's next, we're now seeing the rise of AI agents, autonomous workflows, natural language interfaces that changes how work gets done. What do you see as the most transformative and most misunderstood aspect of this next phase for AI? And how can leaders ensure that automation automation augments rather than displaces the human capacity? Ansel, let's start with you. How will AI agents change the way executives make enterprise-wide decisions?
So our approach is to use the agents in sort of a sequential fashion to build rigor into a decision process. And that starts by sort of breaking decision out into component parts and applying the right sort of like that term of applied, sort of the applied element of it. What are we asking here? How does that answer get to the next one? And then leveraging the technology to do that at speed and equip decision makers with sort of fulsome information. Farley, I love when you were talking about data, and I think one of the one of the realities of the era we live in is sort of the tyranny of data, and that, when you go and talk to executives, when we think about how we're informed, people often make, forgive me for doing this with one hand, but I get it on my phone motion, right? You're scrolling through articles or whatever the algorithm happens to present to you. And I think we have to be really deliberate about that and not inundate ourselves so our capacity is what we heard most recently. And our approach, we partner with Palantir to do this in our case, but it is again to build this sort of rigorous decision-making and structured analytic technique informed process into a decision, and leveraging the agents to do that in a smart way. And we're not wedded to one. I mean, one of the things we've seen over time is actually, as the models evolve, they become good or bad at certain points in that decision train, and you have to be flexible at it. So like a call to ChatGPT 5.0 might not be as effective as a call out to Grok for this particular component part of it.
Or Mistral.
Or Mistral, yes, exactly. Well, the assumption is yours is always better. So just be clear for the room. So that flexibility and I think with AI, we often talk about how fast it's evolving, but I think there's a little bit of a risk that we leverage that to a certain point and then we get stalled. As, we've built this solution here. This is what it is, and we're only going to lean on it. So we have to also then lean into that sort of flexibility. And I actually think AI agents are one of the ways to do that, because they are so interactive and close to intelligent.
Great. Marjorie, maybe a debated topic, but from a model developer standpoint, what is the next frontier? Is it small domain-specific models, multimodal systems, or the integration of AI agents into everyday workflows?
Yeah, I think I actually think this is not the right question, somehow, because I think we've departed the world of model war or model choice in the sense that the model at the end is the foundation for what needs to happen next, which is injecting the enterprise context and then customizing to the use case. To me, the workflow, if we can speak about the workflow, is starting with what business problem are we actually trying to solve with AI, not thinking about how a process needs to be optimized, but how a process needs to be reimagined in the world of AI, exposed to end users that are doing the work every day to make sure it's going to be useful, and then think about what is the right model infrastructure underneath. And yes, it could mean that if you're deploying on the edge, you may need a Ministro, which is a very tiny model that fits on device. If you need something that's highly capable in reasoning, you may pick a larger model. But there's now a variety of choices that could be task-specific, domain-specific, and all of that, in the end, what matters is connecting it to the use case and the business problem it's trying to solve. So you do need a diversity of models, for sure, to accomplish certain tasks, but to me, it's starting with the task and then plugging the technology behind it. And that's a game changer to driving adoption. We don't care about model benchmarks anymore. We don't care to know if we're number one in research benchmarks. We care to know how our model's going to address a specific business problem, which is tackling the question a little bit differently.
Interesting. Aaron, how do you see AI transforming financial professionals' role from data entry to insight generation over the next 3 years?
So I'm going to answer that question, but I kind of want to answer the one you gave Marjorie.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
I think the answer is all of the above. And you guys can pay me later for the free advertising here. But to build on some of what she said, we actually use a few of Mistral's models as the foundation for models that we then develop and we specialize for our domain. And one of the big advantages of the models that we're using from your organization is that they're small, right? So we're working with a 7 billion parameter model from your team, which, to give you a sense of scope here, today's modern frontier models are trillions of parameters. And so there's a direct correlation from in the size of the model to the efficiency, right? Energy consumption, performance, reliability, and predictability. And so Now, how all these things tie together into my all of the above answer is that if you really want to create a great agentic experience, you have to have that kind of predictable performance and efficiency in the brains and in the skills that you're making available for the agents. So leading to the question that you actually asked me, where we are in the journey for the accounting profession is, as I said earlier, it's mainstream now, the use of AI to tackle all of these repetitive chores that have to be done, that you can't get out of. The next step in the evolution is actually now empowering that profession to tackle the kinds of work that I think they got into the profession in the first place to do, right? Being the advisors in business. If there is an opportunity to launch a new product or to acquire a new subsidiary, being an expert, a source of advice and guidance in that transaction. And AI plays a big role here as well, right? So yes, there's sort of the human empathy and massive context that a human can bring to that decision-making process, but they can't possibly evaluate all the sources of information that drive you to the right answer in the way that AI can. So that's where we're at today, right? We've sort of moved on now from automating tasks, and we're now empowering humans to do more valuable work.
Thank you. Farley, your group works at the intersection of consulting and IT services. How are you preparing the global workforce to collaborate with AI rather than compete against it?
Yeah, for me, that's a very interesting question. The nature of our company, we are providing services. So we are not a product company. We provide services using tools, even some of them. Bringing AI to the table somehow is going to amplify the power of our people. It's one example. So how in the beginning, when ChatGPT came and we were talking about coding using Copilot and some other technologies that are available in the market, the developers, they were scared, for sure. So how we turn it around? First, you give training. I answered that in the first question as well. Training, and just to make sure that they understand the tools so they start using and playing with that. We build a full environment, giving access to the 35,000 employees that we have. We build a platform that they have access to all the LLMs. We give training for all of them. We build a team to support them in their ideas. Is the second step. Third step, we open a division to get ideas from the employees. So instead of bringing them the challenge that you are going to be replaced, bring us an idea that you are going to get a recognition from the company. So we start having cases that we all go in public in our internal communication channels. This idea, this product, this solution, this customer is an idea coming from one of the people or a team that we have. So that was bringing the feeling about achievement instead of having a feeling about I'm going to be replaced. I think that is going to work for all the companies. If you think about that, that you start emphasize that for the next 2 or 3 years, I strongly believe you were talking about that before. AI is going to amplify a lot of our power. So we are going to cover some gaps that you were missing people before. We were missing speed. You're missing some quality in some situations. AI can cover that aspect. It might be a case in 3-4 years that we don't know yet because we are not there yet, that we are going to have new positions and even new ways to have new products. So somehow it's working. The company, we have divisions that we know that in 2 years are not going to exist anymore because we are going to replace positions, but all these people, they are already doing something that we were not able to do that before. So I strongly believe that AI is just going to bring more value than we saw before. It's a very beautiful disruptive moment. I'm a 30 years IT guy, and I see just the beauty behind.
Great. As we start to think about closing and reflections, I want to ask the same question to all the panelists. And Marjorie, I'll start with you. As business leaders navigate AI adoption, how can they foster trust
across all applications to ensure it helps achieve the results that they're aiming for?
Yeah, I think it touched a little bit on what my colleague here mentioned a couple of minutes ago. To me, first, it's kind of changing the role of IT a little bit in the organization. I think IT definitely needs to be an enabler, but I think line of businesses now needs to get really engaged in defining what those solutions needs to be. Because that technology is transformative, you need to understand the task in order to really be transformative. So I think that's in all the CEOs in the room, I think that's quite a change, right? IT used to really own the end-to-end process. Now IT is an enabler powered by the line of business. And I do think it goes back to bringing the end users in the pilots. Because those end users, when they're going to realize actually that out of 18 tasks that used to be very boring, now 90% of them are automated, so they can actually go and do most often than not, more interesting things, like Aaron was talking about on the accounting side. Suddenly they become your internal champions. And I think so far it's been working great in logistics, in financial services, in the public sector. So yeah, that's how I would comment on the place of the end user, the place of IT, and then putting the line of business really at the heart of that business transformation. You need all of those parties to be successful.
Ansel, fostering trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually all four of us have said we're talking about not automating the past, we're talking about anticipating the future and getting buy-in from the organization and speaking clearly about how the tools and the systems we're building will advance the whole of the enterprise. You know, and I saw something just sort of recently, you know, that belonging is the greatest indicator of performance on a team. And I think as we adopt this sort of disruptive technology, we have to put that at the core, that this is a way to sort of engage people across the enterprise in greater productivity and greater success, shared success.
Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably unsurprisingly, it's been a big topic in the leadership team at Sage. You know, essentially, how do we really push the organization to embrace AI to its greatest potential? And what we decided was that we needed to set out a couple principles, you know, quite publicly with our employees. And one of those principles was essentially our expectation with AI is to drive greater growth and success, as opposed to some of the headlines that probably cause employees a lot of anxiety, where they're seeing big companies using AI to sort of allow them to do big layoffs, right? It's a very different mindset to say, this is going to enable productivity that drives greater success and greater growth. And I think setting out that objective early on with employees sets the right tone. And then, you know, the second thing that we wrestle with is, okay, you know, on the spectrum of, you know, fully governed, central control, nothing happens unless it comes out of the center, to, you know, wild, wild west, do whatever you want, we're going to trust you to be, innovative. We had to make a decision about where, you know, we were going to stand on that spectrum. And I think there's an important signal to employees about trusting them. And so, you know, we're a very sort of staid British technology company, and it was probably a little bit uncomfortable for us, but we did want to signal to our employees that we trust them, right? And so, yes, we're going to have some central governance. Yes, we've got a global purchasing team and a security team that needs to get involved when there's new technology. But fundamentally, the expectation to our leaders is that when they look at their top initiatives this year, we're going to see AI initiatives amongst that, and we're going to have high expectations based on our trust in those leaders that great outcomes are going to emerge.
Thank you, Farley. Fostering trust?
Well, even the companies, if I'm thinking about how I see the change in the organizations, even our business cases, when we were thinking about how or why I should invest something to develop something new, even the business case sometimes was hard, because you needed to build one full tool. We need to invest a lot of energy, time, people to have some implementation, and just after, you should see the return of investment. With the AI tools, we see, I love her idea. It is more about what's the problem, because I don't see how we cannot get it there with the AI tools that are coming. So more than ever, if you focus on the problems that we have, the tools are going to be available. You see the evolution of the tools are so fast. We were talking about the cycles in the past. It was like 5-year cycles, and then we have a new technology coming. Now, it's like each 6 months, you have products coming, popping up for bringing solutions that we were not able even to think about that before. So I think that all of us, our companies, the governments, they are going to focus more on what is the task, what is the problem, the tools are going to be available, and that's, I think, that is the way to show to organizations and people that they just need to use the tools that are available, and we should focus more on the problems instead of the technologies. That's my last takeaway.
Thank you. On behalf of GARDA, I want to thank IEFA for the opportunity for us to be here, and I hope the audience takes with me a moment to thank all of our panelists for sharing so openly on a topic that's shaping so much of what we do today. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was certainly a highly informative session, and something that really helped to provide us with the details that we need to be informed about the future that is, in fact, actually upon us. As we move along now, we know that Canada used to rely on a fairly robust and stable trading system with our global partners, and particularly with their neighbor to the south. But the times, they are a-changing, and Canada is now embarking on its next chapter in trade. I think it's safe to say that everyone in this room is invested in the conversation we're about to hear. The conversation features Alison Nankerval, the President and CEO of Export Development Canada, and Bruce Croxon, the Managing Partner of Round 13 Capital. And we're going to turn our attention to that conversation after these brief partner messages.
Dear Canadian exporters, we were never meant to be boxed in. Not our ambition, not our ideas, and certainly not our potential. Nothing can contain us. Export Development Canada helps Canadian businesses turn challenges into opportunities with financial solutions and market insights. The world needs more Canada. Together, let's give it to them.
Thanks. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Allison. You did get an intro there, but I wanted to just elaborate a bit more for the audience about personally why I was very excited to have the opportunity to sit with you in these times on this topic. And the reason is because there's not many like you in the Canadian ecosystem that have seen Canadian business from almost every angle. I mean, if you look back on your career, you've had senior positions at the BDC, you've gone early stage with Mars, one of our incubators here. Of course, now in your role as the EDC, you've been investor, you've been fund-to-fund manager, you've seen it all. So some of the questions and directions that the topics are going to go, I think you're ideally suited to answer. So this is going to be great, and appreciate the opportunity. You did comment to me earlier when we were prepping, you said, you know, you were surprised. It's been 9 months you've been on the role at EDC. You've been surprised at how little the Canadian business community really understands about EDC. It has surprised you. Let's use this opportunity to start by talking about EDC. What are some of the products and services that you provide? And then I want to talk a little bit about how you work with the other agencies that the government supports us with. But let's start with EDC.
Sure, happy to. Anyways, great to meet everybody. Really delighted to be here. As Bruce is saying, it's 9 months into this role, but actually earlier in my career was about 15 years at EDC, in and out of Asia, lots of other things, as you said, being an investor. When I think of coming back full circle now to being back at EDC as CEO, I think I have been amazed that despite all the years and all of the work that EDC's done over the years, we're still not that well understood because we are a bit of a strange entity. So technically we are Canada's official export credit agency. So what most other countries would call an EXIM bank, export-import bank, right? So we're there to support Canadian companies who are going abroad in terms of either needing financing so that their buyers can buy their product, needing protection against their exports of non-payment by their foreign buyers, so that might be export credit insurance. It might be they need to put up a bond or performance bond, and we would provide the bonding insurance so that they wouldn't have to draw on their line of their working capital facilities, so we insure the bank. We do a lot of guarantees to banks to allow them to give more working capital to Canadian companies who are doing international operations. And of course, we have the largest project finance team in the country, which nobody knows about. Having supported a lot of the key Canadian industries that have been so active globally, whether that's in infrastructure and mining and energy. And then, of course, we have an equity program, which you and I have spent a lot of time together involved in.
Yeah, you're always there to support equity, too, which is great.
Yeah. So on the early stage as well as into the private equity side. So it's a broad range of things we do. And, that's about 27,000 customers, about 123 billion of trade facilitation each year we do. About 23 billion of that in emerging markets. A footprint globally, 25 representations, offices of types abroad. So it's a big footprint, as well as our 16 offices across the country. So yeah, it's probably a fair amount to get your head around.
You're turning. I bet you're turning into a bit of a road warrior in this role. You're everywhere, right?
Well, that's okay. So having spent half my career sort of in Asia, it kind of feels like coming back to normal.
There you go. So, I mean, I know a lot of the entrepreneurs in the audience and a lot of, companies. Really, part of the challenge in Canada is navigating who supports what from a government perspective. So, how do you work with the BDC, for example? You might want to touch a little bit on the FCC, CCC. I mean, and especially in these times, which we'll get to, how are you working together, and how best can we navigate?
Yeah,
as business people.
It's a good question. Sometimes we sound like an alphabet soup of crown corporations, I know. And yet we all do play very key roles. There's a little bit of overlap, but quite distinct. So, for example, the Business Development Bank of Canada, BDC, more early stage, more focused on those small and mid-sized companies who often aren't exporters yet, or are early stage technology companies. We tend to come in when those companies start to grow to a scale where they've got positive cash flow, they're really starting to export. But we also have distinctive products. We're the only group who does insurance, so protection of insurance, as I said, against non-payment by buyer. We are the only group who would do like bonding and project finance at that big end, right? So I think when I look at the coordination, I would say that often there is an earlier engagement by BDC. Some of that stuff gets handed off to us. And then you have specialized groups like Farm Credit Corp, amazing partner of ours that we work with when we're working in the agriculture industry, where we're trying to do things together in different and creative ways, right? One of the biggest areas in Canada that we've talked about for success, for scaling up and increasing our global exports, which I think is the core of what we're supposed to be talking about here today, I'd say is to work with Farm Credit Corporation and saying, how do we take our most successful larger companies and scale up their operations? Yep. Do they need better logistics? Do they need to have a bigger facility for the production of some kind of if they're doing a processing of grain or of canola seed or anything like that? Can we work together with you to build up the facility so that they can extend the scale of what they're doing to go into multiple markets? So certain crowns are specialized like that. With CCC, for example, which I think you mentioned, Canadian Commercial Corp, in defense, and EDC is now back supporting defense and security industry in Canada, which of course is by nature very export oriented and will continue to grow. So as we see engagement more into Europe, as our government has focused on as an area of core growth for Canada, we would possibly at times be working with CCC, who does a lot of direct government-to-government arrangement of contracts in areas like defense and other areas that are much more structured.
And I think in prepping for this and in conversation with you, and as a lifelong entrepreneur that's dealt my entire career with Canadian banks, for example, and you develop a pretty good understanding of what they'll support and what they won't support. And fortunately, unfortunately, in our history, it's been relatively conservative. And I'm struck by the type of things you will look at, which we as company operators and investors would be surprised. So you're supporting mandates that won't necessarily be supported elsewhere, and I think that's a really important message for the room to understand. Like we would tend to hesitate to approach you because while the bank wouldn't necessarily support that, so I'm going to assume that if they won't, then it might not be worth approaching the EDC. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's important to first of all point out we are very deep partners to the banks. So we do a lot of guarantee products to them where we will, as I said, provide an export guarantee to them to take some of that risk off their books so that they will provide more working capital to Canadian companies. But over and above that, we can participate with them if they feel they're too exposed to a particular company, so we might join their syndication. But more importantly, we'll often do those things that they're not prepared to do. And that might be, for example, a Canadian company who is setting up in a jurisdiction where they have not the appetite to go. So that might be somewhere in Asia. That could be, somewhere in a country in Europe where they don't have a particular sort of appetite or understanding of the risk. And we would, for example, finance that facility based on the local security often and risk of what we're setting up as separate from their core security they're taking in Canada. So one of the things we've been really trying to get across as our message is that we're a big believer that Canada is going to grow not just by shipping from this country, but by doing M&A and having a global footprint of operations in other jurisdictions. And by doing that, it does require having partners who will help you with that M&A vision. And I think we feel that we have the ability to have that partnership, that sense of sitting down with a company and saying, well, where do you want to go? How can we think about helping you in this journey? Understanding it's often a multi-year journey of where you're trying to move to. And I think what we're all struggling with as we have these conversations with our clients is that, like, it's a hard moment. It's a moment that all of us are I think, very much reevaluating. The easy stuff of going directly south has been done. We have to go east and west and north now in terms of how we build out and move our trade around. And that means working with a broader variety of countries, which means you're going to have more footprint and reach into all these other different countries.
Right.
And that's going to take a different kind of risk.
So my takeaway there is, just because the conventional avenues and the traditional banks might not be supportive of an idea or an expansion idea, don't let that stop you. You want to hear from them. Situational analysis, just if you could give us, it's unprecedented times. And we've been doing this for a while. Nobody's quite seen anything quite like this. I know it's only been 9 months, but if I ran into you in the elevator and you had to give me the short version of how you're seeing things right now, can you do that for us?
Yeah, I would say what I feel like is nothing like joining as a CEO at an interesting juncture in our country's history of trade. It felt like we went on pause like a deer in the headlights, I think, for the first 6 months of the year, as people were trying to absorb the reality of what we were facing from a U.S. tariff perspective. And so we could feel it in our clients, right? People were basically just not making decisions. I can't make a decision. I have no certainty. I'm not going to make that investment. I don't even know how I'm going to cope the next day because the rules might be changing. And so every day you wake up and it's navigating that new hurdle of the day. So you've seen a lot of resilience and creativity of people just every day getting up and saying, okay, how do I have to tweak my supply chain today? How do I need to think about, how this or that product maybe has to change to make it a little easier to get across the border? And so that's a day-to-day existence, which means you're not thinking about, well, where did I want to go this year? What was I thinking about from a multi-year perspective? I would tell you now the reality of where we are as a country and some of those broader decisions of what companies have to make are starting to happen, and we're having those conversations. So I wouldn't say that people have moved dramatically, but those conversations are happening in a way that I feel like as you move into 2026, you'll start to see companies taking steps. This is our new reality. This is how we navigate. And I think the message we're trying to say is come and have a conversation with us. We know it's a hard moment, but we're really interested in seeing how we can be creative and think out of the box, because we know it's just going to look different now. Things are going to have to be out of the box compared to what they used to be.
Yeah, and data lags, as we know, right? Yeah. So I mean, we've had a tough quarter. Probably going to be a tough next quarter. Yep. Are you seeing some signs? And I'm really, again, we'll get to diversification outside of the U.S. in a second, but just in terms of doing business with the easiest country historically to do business with, are you seeing some optimism? Are you? How are you advising companies that we're used to having it easy?
Yeah, so it's been a tough year. I won't kid you. You can see it in the numbers. We're seeing it in our exports. We're seeing it in our companies are really hurting, but it isn't equal across the board, right? So you've got companies. I think Ontario and Quebec with the manufactured industries, with the key industries like softwood, like steel, like aluminum, are really, really hurting. As are parts of the auto value chain.
Big industries, those big industries
for this, especially for Eastern Canada, right? As you go west, I think there are some areas where things have been doing pretty well because, energy is important again, and energy value chains are pretty significant in Canada. Not just the production of oil and gas upstream, but the downstream piece. We have a lot of advanced manufacturing related to various aspects of the energy value chain, of course, in addition to nuclear, in addition to hydro. Like, we actually have huge manufacturing capability in this that's doing very well. So you do get a different vibe if you talk to somebody in Calgary versus what you do when you talk to them in Toronto or Windsor. So, I think there's a lot of optimism around what the future of critical minerals can look like for Canada. And you can feel a boom in mining starting to happen in terms of interest in equipment, a buildup of some of these things we're talking about now with national projects. You can start to feel some of those value chains move, but it's just the beginnings.
So strategically then, is part of your role becoming to identify industries and sectors that are more conducive to world markets and zero in on them proactively? Or, I mean, historically it's been wait for people to approach you for help, and business was good, right? I mean, you didn't really have to grind that way. Is that becoming a change in the mandate?
Yeah, we're very careful about talking about, like, we don't make policy. We aren't the government. But we do read the signals of the market that the market is telling us. Okay. Right? Which is to say that when we see opportunities, and by the way, by having all those international offices and all those relationships, we have a significant number of global buyers. We also know what people are looking for.
Right.
And so we can use some of those signals to kind of reach back into Canadian capability, because we do have a sense of what Canada has to offer. That's a big part of what we focus on, is how do we know what's in our value chain of what Canada's good at, and then try to pull that into these various value chains. So we do a thing called connections financing, where we introduce Canadian companies to foreign buyers all over the world. And most of that actually happens outside the US. So in areas like agri-food and clean tech, areas of technology, and also we've done that in traditional areas in the past related to, so for example, value chains related to mining or value related to natural resources. And that's been very successful over the years to get companies into new markets, like to get them into Latin America, to get them into Asia. And so I think that's the intelligence we use to come back and say, hey, we're hearing this is interesting. And by the way, we know you're really good at this. And if you're interested, we can help you really think about growing to be in even more markets than you're in now.
And you've told me a couple of times you don't talk politics, but your old boss, I can't remember his name, that Katy Perry's boyfriend, he didn't cover us in glory with the India-China relationships. Can you at least discuss whether we're getting better at opening up those markets? How are our relationships with those two large markets that we somehow managed to get angry over the last decade?
Yeah, well, for someone who lived herself, I lived 14 years in China, so I've seen the ebb and flow of that over the decades. I would tell you, I think we're on a path where we actually will have an engagement. I think it's just, Canada has to be practical. When you have a mandate to not significantly change, but at least take your US strategy and make it a US +1 +2 strategy as a company, you got to look at the other large markets. And so I think that's a recognition we're seeing on the part of our government. I think it's a recognition on the part of those countries also seeing a value of having a relationship with Canada, right? So, I mean, we've obviously seen the signals that India, we're much more normalized now in our relationship, and that seems to be on a path going forward, so that's positive. But even with China, there's obviously discussions going on to see if we can take the temperature down on that relationship, and I think that's important. I think it's positive because in a market that we're facing where we have to have a diversified way of looking at where do we find our trade partners, there's no one company, or sorry, there's no one country that will make up for whatever the loss you might be for you as a company of certain share in the United States. You need to be looking multiple places, and so you just need to have more discussions with.
I think you've told us, like, you know, you can't assume that, none of us can assume it's going back to the way it used to be. So I got to imagine that you're getting busier with inbounds on how do I get into other countries, and how are you, you know, we've had it so easy for so long, you know, and it's been such a large available market. As young companies that aren't used to going outside of North America look to go global, I mean, how are you advising them? What kind of inbounds are you getting? Are you seeing a lot more of it? Are we shifting the needle? I mean, people have said, you know, more than once that, you know, Trump may be the best thing that's happened to Canada in terms of a wake-up call. I mean, I know you're not really about the interprovincial stuff that's going on with EDC, but, you know, talk to us a little bit about the changes that you are seeing. And, you know, it's been a tough little bit, but, you know, I'm a patriot and an eternal optimist, and you know, spread some goodwill, you know, some good hope to us as to what you might be seeing, how we're reacting. We're resilient people.
I think we are, but I often think that, I don't know who is it who tends to me that Canadians don't respond to opportunity, they respond to crisis. Which means that we probably wait until it has to be a very urgent thing before we pick up and do something very hard and very different. I think we're at that moment. It's that break glass moment, as a quote is often used. I think we're capable because I've gone across the country in my first 9 months, and I've talked to a lot of companies, and I've been incredibly impressed. I would tell you that deselection by Canadian companies of an opportunity to grow is a big issue, right? Just deselecting yourself and saying, yeah, you know, I don't know about that. I don't know if I can find the partners. I don't know if I can if I really want to commit to that. But it's like, actually, I am seeing a change in attitude of a certain generation, and I think a certain sort of stream of exporters and Canadian companies, because they do see that this is a pivotal moment. And I think they do see that there is a Team Canada approach. At least there's a lot of people around here who want to help you. And I think that's the message we want to keep reinforcing. And I think the one thing also is that Canadian companies are actually by nature more resilient than we think, because they generally operate with less capital, with less technology, with you know, less brand awareness, and so they have to work harder to get there. And I've had a lot of groups that I know who invest in Canadian companies as they might in U.S. companies. They say, yeah, no, the Canadian companies are more tenacious. They can get there because they're scrappier, right? So I believe, and I have the faith, and I see a lot of good companies. It's like, how do we take them from being 150 million to 300 to 600 and up, right?
That was always the challenge.
That's where you have to grow, I think, over time by having M&A, and you have to have footprints in other markets. You can't do everything from Canada.
And, you know, back to, you know, you being the ideal person to answer this question, because it's, you know, BDC, EDC, Mars, working with the government over many years. I mean, we also haven't done a great job of supporting our own in terms of when we wanted the government wanted a contract done,
right.
or favoring our own very capable. I'll talk about tech. I come from tech. Very capable technology companies that could have done the job, but it goes to the U.S. because for whatever reason. Are we getting better? Is this crisis forced us to forget the elbows up, just like work together, EDC, BDC, the government, are we moving quicker, right, when we sense opportunities? Talk to us a little bit about, like, because you've been in the catbird seat to see change. You've been, business is easy, money's plentiful, it's getting a little tougher, now it's really tough. Talk to us about the change you may have seen over your tenure.
I think it is changing. I think you've heard the signals that Canadian procurement is first and foremost, including in the digital side, right? And I actually think, again, an area that I'm going to point out, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff we have to do in infrastructure because we need to move more product, and you have to have better infrastructure to move more product to more markets. But there's one thing that's easier to move, and that's services and export of electrons with digital services, right? That's really easy to export. And technology companies are global by nature, and there's no reason we shouldn't be, our technology companies, going beyond the US. Often it's just, it's just nobody ever bothers to tell them or think about that, right?
We didn't have to.
No, we didn't have to, but I think we do.
Big.
I think we do now, right? And I think that we have to really cultivate that next generation of what Canadian trade looks like. It doesn't look like the past. It's not just raw materials. It's not just, certain kinds of goods. There's a whole service and invisible and digital trade that's key. And we need to have sovereignty in the solutions we're providing. And I think that's what you're starting to hear in that Buy Canadian. It's like, how do we bring coalition
opportunity where we should focus more, irrespective of vertical or whatever, just, not necessarily the place you like traveling most or what have you, but just.
Yeah, I'm going to give you two because I know we were talking about, I'm going to give two. So one out of Europe, I think, is what I call New Europe, which is basically Central and Eastern Europe. So Poland is going to be massive for defense for us. It's going to be massive for areas of potential infrastructure. I think there's a lot there we can do. And that is a very interesting country where there's actually a lot of cultural ties as well. I think we can really deliver on certain areas of our, maybe let's call it our traditional areas of strength in engineering, infrastructure, certain areas of energy. The other, though, is Japan, in my view. And I mean, you probably could say the same to Korea, but I think Japan even more because Japan has significant presence already in this country. It tends to be in areas and pockets with energy. It might be in some of the trading houses. But Japan, I think, has a curiosity about Canada and a great sense of understanding the value of the energy offer we have, but it's also very interested in our technology. And you are actually seeing like these two areas. You've got like technology on one level happening of partnerships, including in AI that's happening, and you've got it happening in energy. And I think that partnerships that involve us just exploring that a little bit more deeply really have high potential. And I'd love to see us do more of that as a country.
Thanks, Alison. You know what? I can't believe it. 25 minutes goes by quick. We're out of time. Thank you. I actually feel good that we have you representing us and really trying hard to combat what are significant. No one would deny our significant headwinds. So I really do take heart on this. And I think my main message that I'm taking away, and it's one that I've been used to all my career as well. You know, when you bump up against roadblocks that may be conventional ones, banks, traditional financiers, we've got groups here that are highly vested in growing the country and are more than willing and extra willing now to lend a hand. So thank you very much and appreciate the time that you took with us today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And how lovely to have Alison here with us at the Toronto Global Forum for the first time in this new official capacity as well. We are lucky to have had the voice of EDC as part of our conversations for many years. But thank you to both for a very, very engaging conversation. And now we are moving into the final presentation of the day. But first, I would like to thank our presenting partner, Cogeco, for their sustained support of this Toronto Global Forum. We really are very grateful to them. And I'd also like to thank our strategic partners, the City of Toronto, BMO, Niagara Economic Development, GE Vernova, Sagard, Development Bank of Southern Africa, G20 South Africa 2025. And we are extremely grateful to our gold partners, McKinsey & Company, OCP, EDC, Garda World, Embassy of the United Arab Emirates, Morningstar DBRS, Ministers' Council on the Canadian Francophonie, Dentons, Vendée Insurance, Danone, U Ottawa Professional Development Institute, Invest in Canada, Brand South Africa, and Infrastructure South Africa. And of course, we extend our sincere thanks to our government partners, the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario, to our official airline partner, Air Canada, and to our media partners, the Financial Times and the Hill Times. We are truly grateful to these exceptional companies. But now let's move on to the final conversation that I mentioned, where we're going to be looking at financing models and pathways for Indigenous-led growth, a conversation which is offered in collaboration with National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association. I'm delighted to present your moderator, Magnolia Perron, the Director of Strategy and Partnerships for the NACCA, and she will introduce her guests after these messages.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're really delighted to be here on behalf of the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association to present our session on financing Indigenous growth through partnerships and youth leadership. My name is Magnolia Perron. I'm the Director of Strategy and Partnerships at NACA. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, NACA, we're a national network of over 50 Indigenous financial institutions, coast to coast to coast across the country, that provide First Nations, Métis, and Inuit entrepreneurs with access to capital. I'm thrilled to be joined by two incredible panelists who will bring their unique perspectives to today's conversation. So please join me in welcoming Chris Lefebvre, who is the co-founder and vice president and head of sales of OGBIC, and a proud member of NACA's Indigenous Youth Business Advisory Council, as well as Marissa Neubauer, the Director of Business Strategy Development at TELUS. Before we dive into today's topics, I'd love to pass it over to first you, Chris, and then Marissa, to introduce yourselves and share a little bit about the organizations you represent.
Sure, pleasure to be here, everybody. Chris Lefebvre. I'm originally from Matagami First Nation. It's a community up in northeastern Ontario, part of Treaty 9. I'm the co-founder of OGBIC, and I have a company called Bowadden Consulting.
Good afternoon. My name is Marissa Neubauer. I am the Director of Business Strategy Development at TELUS, which is actually a very generic name when I say it out loud. But for those of you in the crowd that maybe aren't from Canada, TELUS is a technology company based in Canada that provides advanced high-speed internet and wireless solutions that really can create change in the world. And so when you look at connectivity, we really look at how do we invest in products and solutions through healthcare, through agriculture, that can support the growth of our economy, but also our communities. It's a pleasure to be here today. And God, these lights are so bright. I feel like I'm like paparazzi taking photos.
So thanks, Chris. Thanks, Marissa, for being here. And thanks again to those in the audience. As I mentioned, today's discussion is about financing Indigenous growth, but equally it's about the power of partnerships and youth leadership and driving that growth forward. Indigenous people are the fastest and youngest growing demographic in our country, and Indigenous entrepreneurship and business development is on the rise. And youth in particular are making up a big portion of our population, and we're looking for ways to support them to find pathways to self-determination and prosperity. And we see business and entrepreneurship as a pathway for youth to find their passion, make change in their communities, and support not only the Indigenous economic development, but Canada's prosperity more widely. Yet barriers remain. We know there's limited access to capital, a lack of culturally relevant financial tools, and certification systems that don't reflect Indigenous realities. So the question is, what will it take to create a truly equitable and sustainable financing ecosystem that supports Indigenous-led innovation and community growth? The good news is that through partnerships between Indigenous financial institutions, through corporations, and through governments, we're beginning to close those gaps. So today we'll examine three key themes. One is how Indigenous youth are leading innovation and community impact, how corporate partners are aligning reconciliation goals with Indigenous economic priorities, and exploring financial models and collaborations that are proven effective in supporting sustainable Indigenous-led growth. So to dive into some of our questions, Chris, I'd love to start with you. As both a young entrepreneur and a NACA Youth Council member, what trends and innovations are you seeing among Indigenous youth in business today?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I forgot to mention it at the start, but Ojibik's a corporate furniture dealership. And for us, the trends that we see are really a lot of Indigenous businesses banding together. So we have a lot more access to each other than we've ever had in the past. And for example, with Ojibik, we've been working with a number of different artists, different sort of furniture manufacturers that maybe aren't at the commercial grade. And we're able to work together and actually get them to the commercial grade where we're able to help sell their products in the corporate setting. So it really is about banding together and helping each other out. We've been really fortunate that way, that we've been able to meet and connect with Indigenous entrepreneurs all across the country.
Thanks, Chris. I think, Chris's company, Ojibik, is just one of many of the young Indigenous businesses that NACA supports through our network of Indigenous financial institutions, which are Indigenous-owned, community-based financial institutions that provide financing to Indigenous businesses. And we often see young people starting businesses in retail trade, construction, consulting, also in innovation and tech. So I'd love you to maybe explore a little bit more on the types of support systems such as mentorship, capital, and training. And of those, what do you think makes the biggest difference in supporting youth?
For me personally, it was the mentorship side at the beginning, right? I've had a couple really great bosses in the past who have been able to support me and build up my confidence over time. And really, those are the folks that allowed me to leave my 9-to-5 job and start my entrepreneurial journey. So the mentorship was really critical for me. But you'll hear this over and over again, and this is a scenario for many Indigenous people and many Indigenous businesses, but it always comes down to access to capital is always going to be the biggest hurdle for us.
Thanks, Chris. And we're going to dive into that a little bit further around what sort of financing models and innovative ways are out there to support youth to increase their access to capital. But Marissa, let's turn it over to you. So TELUS has made youth leadership a visible priority, even including dedicated youth representative space on your Indigenous Advisory Council. So tell us why it's important for TELUS to bring Indigenous youth to the table.
Thank you. As I was listening to you talk, I just realized that I am the elder on this panel, which is kind of terrifying. I actually just wanted to touch base on something Chris said, which is Indigenous businesses banding together to support each other. I think that it's such an important thing to talk about because you're in the Indigenous economy, you're creating an ecosystem of not competition, but working together to support each other's success. And I think that is such an important way in which we are melding together two different perspectives of both Indigenous worldviews and business, and how the two of them can come together, but that can also create successful economies and successful benefits for all of us. So I just wanted to double click on that. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think every one of us in this room that are looking at, products and services that we need to sell, or we're looking at consumers that we need to create relationships with, or we're looking at a large demographic of individuals who are going to start leaving our workforce soon. We have a lot of risks in front of us, but we have a lot of opportunities in front of us. And I think the only way we can really address that is by starting to have conversations with those that are going to be coming in and supporting the success of our economies, our communities into the future. When we, as an organization, were building our reconciliation strategy, and for those in the audience that don't know, 10 years ago, the 94 calls to action came out in Canada. They were established by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was established to bring truths forward about the impacts and about what happened at the residential school system here in Canada. The 94 calls to action said this is the way that as a country we can move forward to reconcile. Call to action number 92 specifically said this is the call to action for corporate Canada. You can make sure that your teams understand what our shared history is. You have to make sure that you're engaging and working with Indigenous people and working on their land. And lastly, you need to make sure that you're playing your role in advancing economic reconciliation. And so when we were building that strategy, we were engaging with leaders, elders, subject matter experts across the country. And we heard time and time again, well, what about the youth? They're the future. They're taking over. They're the carriers of our culture and tradition. You're moving into first and second generations of youth who have away from residential school, who are here and eager. And so we said, okay, well, what's the best way in which we can involve youth in our work? And so we said, we're going to have an Indigenous Advisory Council that guides what TELUS does. Business leaders from across the country that we meet with twice a year that can help TELUS in our journey. And we dedicated 2 specific spots on that council, Magnolia being one of them, to make sure that we have youth voices at the table. And it has been honestly, some of the most exciting conversations that happen in our Indigenous Advisory Council are when Magnolia and her counterparts are bringing forward things that the rest of us that don't know what Snapchat is, to help us really kind of go, oh, we were looking at this completely wrong. They're bringing forward great suggestions around how we can better embed reconciliation into our work, how we can better approach Indigenous entrepreneurs and Indigenous businesses because they're in this space. But what I really appreciate about having Indigenous youth at the table is get on with it already, right? Like I remember when reconciliation wasn't a concept, and to be in this space now where it is constant conversation in corporate Canada, to have youth on the table to be like, this is great, stop talking, start acting, and how are you going to incorporate it in? It really motivates folks to action, and it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, thanks. I know at NACA as well, we've developed a National Indigenous Business Advisory Council made up of 7 young Indigenous entrepreneurs from across the country. Chris is one of our youth council members, and we brought him on to help provide guidance and direction as we developed our Indigenous Youth Entrepreneurship Program that just launched earlier this spring across 30 of our Indigenous financial institutions. But it was really important for us, if we were going to design and develop programming for Indigenous youth, that it was informed by them so that it would make sense and work for their needs and address the barriers they're facing when trying to access capital. So let's come back to you, Chris, as a young Indigenous business owner. How are you seeing young Indigenous entrepreneurs balance traditional knowledge with modern business models to create meaningful community impact?
Yeah, I can only speak for myself, but through Ojibik, we've found a really interesting niche where, like I mentioned, we're a corporate furniture dealership, but when we're in these spaces, a lot of the times, because they know we're a First Nation-owned business, they ask, hey, can you guys help us out with the art? And that has really been a great opportunity for us. So now we have a young woman named Emily Laurent Henderson on our staff. She's an Nanook woman, and she's formerly the curator for the McMichael Gallery. So she's our in-house curator and art advisor. So what she does is she actually works with our clients, our corporate clients, to identify their needs. If they're looking for specific artists from a specific region, she helps source them. And through that, we're sort of blending the needs of our corporate clients, but then providing opportunities for young Indigenous artists. And these are folks that maybe they don't, maybe they have a website, maybe they have an Instagram, but they're not in galleries, they're not represented. So we have the opportunity to use art as a way to raise individuals' profiles and actually show that art and that medium could be a viable career. So we've been really fortunate that way, where we've been able to blend sort of the traditional knowledge and the actual art that we've been doing for many, many years into a corporate setting, but not in a sort of tokenistic way, right? We're not just putting up medicine wheels everywhere. We're really working with artists and really defining sort of what they want to do and putting that into a corporate space. And it really helps out with the learning as well for a lot of these corporate clients that we have.
Can I just add to that? I think the placekeeping work that Chris is talking about, it doesn't just benefit entrepreneurs, it benefits businesses. So TELUS went through a process where we actually worked, we actually renovated our floor here in Toronto in one of our buildings, and we worked with Indigenous architects, Indigenous artists, Indigenous knowledge keepers to go, okay, how do we create a space that is reflective of those who lived here since time immemorial? And what we have created on that floor is orientation that faces due north, no matter due north, east, south, and west. No matter where you look, you can see the water, right? And it's created a space that team members want to work in. They want to come into the office and work in this space. They want to sit in the longhouse that we've created in there because it feels conducive to working together, right? So I think the great thing about this work is that it benefits everybody. At the end of the day, you're supporting Indigenous artists, you're supporting Indigenous businesses, you're supporting learning, but at the same time, you're having team members that want to work in these spaces because they feel inspired, because it harkens back to a different way of sitting in an office than we're traditionally used to.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I've been in the TELUS Toronto head office, and it is a beautiful space. So thanks for sharing that. And I think that's what I love about working with Indigenous businesses, that you see they're often creating employment opportunities in their community. They're hiring other community members. There's a focus on hiring Indigenous youth and giving back to the community. There's often, you know, an environmental or social impact part of their business that they're contributing to the overall well-being. I'd love to come back to you, Marissa, to hear a little bit more around some of the other work TELUS is doing to support Indigenous youth, specifically through maybe some of the bursaries or co-op programs you run.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to talk about it in terms of, Magnolia talked about at the beginning, you know, Indigenous entrepreneurs are the fastest growing group in this country today. Indigenous youth are the fastest growing demographic in the country. We all know that there is going to be a gap in resources coming into our companies in the next couple of years as people start retiring. And as corporations, as organizations, we need to make sure that we're getting ahead of that. And so from an organizational perspective, I'll kind of look at it in a couple of different ways. One is, we're really focusing on, we've built an Indigenous employment strategy. How do we support Indigenous students coming out of universities and coming into the job space to know that TELUS is a good place to work? It's a good place to work from a cultural perspective, from a respect perspective, from a career growth perspective. It's really, really important that they come and work for TELUS as opposed to somebody else, right? Because I want those ideas. I want that fresh diversity in the organization. I want people to come. So that's part of what we've been doing, is how do we build that pipeline of talent? It starts with an Indigenous employment strategy. strategy. We've created a specific Indigenous retention strategy, making sure that when people come into the organization, they don't cycle out in a year. Because I think when you look at most organizations right now, the retention rate for Indigenous people tends to be lower. So really focusing on that. The other thing that we're doing is how do you create a pipeline directly from universities? So there's two ways in which we're looking at that. One is we've partnered with Inspire, which is a national Indigenous organization that funds scholarships to provide funding specifically to support Indigenous students who are looking to grow their careers. And we really are focusing on students that are looking to grow their careers in areas that create benefit for all of us. So whether it's in the health space, the agriculture space, the environmental space. And then the other thing that we've been doing is how do we create specific co-op fellowship positions so those students can then come in and learn what it is to work in an organization. So we have two specific positions out right now. Actually, we have an Indigenous co-op student specifically supporting in our security team. And then we've actually just posted for an Indigenous co-op student to support in how do we integrate Indigenous perspectives into our data ethics strategy, into our responsible AI strategy. And so really excited to see those pipelines coming in through the universities that we've built relationships with.
Thanks, Marissa. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about partnerships. They're critical to creating change within our systems, and we're talking about partnerships between communities, governments, investors, and corporations. Chris, your company, you have a consulting company, Bawadin, that specializes in building strong partnerships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations. So can you tell us what you've learned about how to lead these relationships, and where do you see the greatest opportunity for collaboration right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I'll take it back a little bit. Formerly, I used to work for the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. So they're the treaty rights holders to the land that you guys are on right now. And I was the head of business development for them. And it was only 5 years ago when we really couldn't get a meeting with, a lot of corporate Canada. So the idea that, Indigenous participation has shifted and changed so much in the last 5 years is incredible. But now that we're at the table and we have an opportunity to get in front of corporate Canada and they're interested in working with Indigenous businesses and Indigenous communities, the next step really is around procurement. So when people talk about what does a partnership mean, the one thing that I always say, and it jumps out immediately, is when an organization wants to sort of walk the walk, it typically comes down to having some sort of public procurement target. What are you guys willing to spend, and what are you guys willing to make public? So as soon as there's a little bit of shareholder pressure, it's amazing what these companies can do when there's, all of a sudden there's a bit of shareholder pressure, and they're the most creative, innovative companies you'd ever see, right? Because now that they have the goals out there, they're not going to go backwards on them. So the power of sort of putting that public procurement spend is really powerful. And I think a lot of Indigenous communities and Indigenous-owned businesses see that. And then we're able to work in a lot more collaborative way because we each have goals that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, thanks. Procurement's an interesting topic, and that's probably a good segue to a question I had for you, Marissa, around, how is TELUS and how can corporate partners more broadly open doors to new markets, investment, or procurement opportunities for Indigenous-owned businesses?
So I was in a panel a couple weeks ago with Bill Lomax, who's the CEO of the First Nations Bank of Canada. And one of the things that he talked about, and I'm crediting him in case anybody goes back to him, is that he's talking about the missing middle. So right now, there's a big conversation in Canada around critical resource extraction, LNG, the LNG race, pipelines, and we're talking about these big, massive projects and Indigenous participation and equity in these projects, which is very important. But what we're not talking about is all of those procurements that are going to create the success of those projects. It's those businesses that are going to be supporting those projects that we really need to be thinking about and focusing on, because those projects are going to affect a certain number of First Nations, but not all of them, whereas procurement has the ability to affect a majority of communities across this country who don't have critical minerals in their backyard. And so I think it's really important as organizations to be thinking about, you have the power to procure. At the end of the day, every single one of us in a corporate environment has the power to procure from Indigenous businesses. And there are so many great Indigenous businesses out there. And I actually agree with Chris. Targets are super important. At TELUS, we have a reconciliation action plan. It's public. I report on it annually. We're held to task for it. And I think it's really important to hold ourselves accountable. But I think at the other end of it is Indigenous businesses have access to capital that non-Indigenous businesses don't. Indigenous businesses have access to different loans that non-Indigenous organizations don't. It's really smart business to be working with Indigenous governments, to be working with Indigenous companies to help advance your needs. And I guarantee you, doesn't matter what your need is in this room. If you go into Google or Yahoo or whatever search engine I'm allowed to talk about with sponsors right now, and you put in a business that you're looking for, an Indigenous business, you will find one. The growth is astonishing. The businesses are there. And I'll give you an example. We had a company that was looking to grow, but in order to grow, they needed some guaranteed long-term revenue. And so we partnered with them and provided a guaranteed 4-year partnership to allow them to grow. They went from 1 truck to 12 trucks in the course of 4 years and working with a number of different clients because we could provide them with that continuity. So yes, it's about the dollars, but it's also about the continuity and the support. Can you support for a certain period of time to help that company get up off the ground and bring in other clients?
It's a really good point. I know for NACA, a big focus for us is the procurement and supporting the establishment of the First Nations Procurement Authority. That's going to help both private and public and government in their procurement efforts. The federal government has the 5% set aside for federal procurement opportunities, and we know a lot of corporations like TELUS are looking for Indigenous businesses. NACA, along with 4 other national Indigenous organizations, have supported the establishment of this First Nations Procurement Authority that's going to help with developing databases of Indigenous businesses, helping with the certification and verifying Indigenous businesses, and the training and capacity piece that'll go into it. So it's a really important area. Let's talk a little bit more. So, we've mentioned that, TELUS has an Indigenous Reconciliation Action Plan. It's actually the first publicly traded company and telecommunications company to have an Indigenous Reconciliation Action Plan. So can you tell us a little bit more about what sort of approaches or principles you take with building partnerships with Indigenous communities and Indigenous governments?
I can, and I should actually just say, we were talking about Indigenous entrepreneurs. You have one right here who has 2 businesses and who has actually just told me backstage that he started Ojibwe last year, and this year is 12 employees and $5 million of sales. So, I mean, the future, the opportunities are here. Sorry, what was my question? About partnerships, right?
That's right.
Thank you for that.
How do we do partnerships? Okay, at the end of the day, you don't get married without having several dates. You don't get married without getting to know somebody, building a relationship, understanding how you both think about, early mornings or late nights. Relationships are fundamentally based in getting to know one another, building trust, understanding where the person comes from, understanding their family. It's no different than working with Indigenous communities. At the end of the day, it is about building trust and building relationships based on trust. And I don't know if I'm allowed to swear in here, but I just kind of have a don't be an asshole policy. At the end of the day, you are going to go, you're going to have a conversation, you're going to make so many mistakes. It's not about the mistakes that you're making, it's about how you recover from the mistakes. It's about when an Indigenous community says something is wrong or to approach it differently, you don't go, well, that's the way I do it. You sit down, you listen, and you think about how you approach it. And I'll give you a really cool example. So TELUS has been working with the Nisga'a Nation, which is the first modern treaty First Nation in British Columbia, which is the far west side of the country, and they're based up in the far northwest of the country. And so modern treaty means they have sovereign rights to their land. And for Nisga'a, what was really important is that they wanted to build they wanted a wireless network in their community. They wanted cell service in their community, but they they wanted to own the assets. It was really important for them from a sovereignty perspective. So we sat down together over 18 months to really understand what were Niska's goals, what did they want to achieve, what could TELUS do, how could TELUS support, and we ended up working together to create a project where Niska actually owns the infrastructure, so they own the towers in the community, and TELUS has trained them on how to maintain that infrastructure and also bring net new carriers onto that infrastructure. And so, but in order to do that, and it was the first of its kind, TELUS had never done that before. In order to do that, we needed to sit down, we needed to understand each other, we needed to understand what their goals were. So it took time, but at the end of the day, Niska now has connectivity, wireless connectivity throughout their 4 villages, throughout their highway coverage, and they own that infrastructure and they're maintaining it, which was super important to them.
Thanks, Marissa. Really appreciate that example. Let's switch gears a little bit and get into sort of our third theme, which was really around financing. So I touched on that NACA has an Indigenous youth entrepreneurship program that we launched. We also have an Indigenous women entrepreneurship program. These are financial products that are supporting smaller micro businesses. We've actually capitalized with support from the federal government, a micro loan fund to support women and youth to access microloans up to $25,000. So really supporting those with maybe home-based or part-time businesses. We see a lot of artisans come through the program, which I know we talked about artists earlier. But then on the flip side, we also have our Indigenous Growth Fund, which is an investment grade, social finance fund that was supported by NACA and supported by some of the crown corporations across the country. It's a $153 million fund that's raising private and institutional investors so that we're bringing more capital into our network so that we can support more businesses in accessing loans through our network of Indigenous financial institutions. So those are some of the ways that NACA's looking to create new innovative solutions to support Indigenous business development in Canada. I'm wondering, Chris, maybe you can speak to, as an Indigenous business, a young entrepreneur, what kind of financing models and frameworks have been most effective for you as an entrepreneur starting and growing your business?
Yeah, sure. So I think just to start, when people talk about Indigenous business and the opportunities out there, they're endless. But really, the opportunity for capital isn't as easy as a lot of people say it is. But the good thing is that NACA exists, and so does the Indigenous financial institutions. So for me, having an IFI, Two Rivers was the one that I went through, which is the one based out in Six Nations, to have their support at the start of my business was critical, right? They were able to give us our first bit of capital, and really that was helpful to kick us off. Like without the support of the IFI, we wouldn't have been able to grow. We wouldn't have been able to even really get started. And not only was it the capital, but it was more the support through like the entire NACA organization and some of the different IFIs across the country. If Two Rivers wasn't able to help me, they were more than happy to put me in touch with another group in Northern Ontario, or I think we even worked with one that was out west. So the entire group of IFIs are really sort of, again, similar theme to the first question, but about banding together, right? The opportunity to help Indigenous youth get the capital that they need is, sort of an entire network of people looking out for you. So it's not just the one network. So I'd say the IFI network has been great for me personally. And there's a number of other opportunities out there, but really we needed to have that proof of concept. GBIC's relatively new still, so we weren't able to go to the banks quite yet. And to have NACA and to have some of the IFIs help us out and give us that first tranche of cash really, saved the company, to be real.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And just to clarify for the folks in the room, an IFI is an Indigenous financial institution. There's over 50 of them that NACA represents. And that's why we were established over 35 years ago to fill that gap where Indigenous businesses couldn't go to mainstream financial institutions to get a loan because of restrictions with operating a business on reserve, for example, and many other systemic issues that still exist today. So, Marissa, TELUS also supports small and medium-sized enterprises. Can you talk maybe specifically about the TELUS Pollinator Fund for Good and how that's supporting Indigenous businesses?
I can. I quickly want to mention, the Indigenous economy is worth $56 billion. I think that's the current stat that I recently read. That's $56 billion. Like, it is a massive, massive economy and opportunity space here in Canada. So what is the TELUS Pollinator Fund for Good? So the TELUS Pollinator Fund for Good is a investment fund that was specifically established to support companies and founders that are looking to do good, that are looking to build businesses that drive change in our society. Again, whether it's from a health ingenuity perspective, a tech ingenuity perspective, agriculture, they're really looking at investing in those types of businesses, as well as businesses from underrepresented founders. And so it's a $100 million fund that has been invested in some really cool businesses. And so just to talk about a couple of them. So one of the businesses is oh my goodness, Bobby Rissette's company, Virtual Gurus. Thank you, it came to me. So Virtual Gurus is started by Bobby Rissette, which is a company that was specifically focused on, not everybody needs a full-time EA or full-time admin staff, but they need staff behind the scenes to help them on a part-time basis. On the flip side, you have a market of single moms that can only work part-time, other underrepresented groups that maybe didn't have the capacity to have a full-time job because of other responsibilities. And so Bobby essentially saw a market where she goes, we can provide these virtual gurus, these virtual support systems by working with Indigenous women and mothers and other groups that maybe don't have access to full-time jobs. And so she's brought together these two things, which has created employment opportunities in community while also providing a business need. So that's one of the really cool organizations that the Pollinator Fund has funded.
Thanks, and we love Bobby. She's actually the chair of the Indigenous Prosperity Foundation, an organization that NACA helped establish that launched a couple of years ago. And it's raising philanthropic funds to support early stage women and youth entrepreneurs across the country, with a focus on financial literacy, digital literacy, as well as seed grants. So also sort of touching on some of the financial options that are out there to support Indigenous businesses. So I know we're getting short on time. It's the end of the day. Folks are tired. So maybe I'll just ask you one sort of final question before we wrap out. And that would be, what's one recommendation that you would give the policymakers or the business leaders in the room today to support Indigenous-led growth?
Look, at the end of the day, it's not difficult. TELUS is a massive bureaucratic corporation full of lots of spans and layers, and we managed to we are embedding reconciliation into our business. You have to start somewhere, and so I recommend that you start by going, what are the intersection points between what your business does and what reconciliation is in Canada, and how can you support? And there's amazing organizations. Chris has an organization that specifically supports corporations to do this work. And sit down and go, where can I support? Where's there benefit to both community and my business? Because I guarantee you there is. And just one other thought. Canada wants to hit net zero by 2050? I think that's our goal. One of the banks, and I'm sorry, I can't remember which one, came out the other day to say that in order to do that, it's going to be $2 trillion. $2 trillion to hit that mark. All of those projects that are going to support clean energy in Canada are going to be on Indigenous territories in this country. The opportunity that we have is now, and it is so vast, we can't not take advantage of it.
I think for me, I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record again, but it really just comes down to putting public targets. It's the easiest way for organizations to really put their foot down and make a difference. There's that aspect of it, but the other thing that I want to mention too is, now that reconciliation is a word that everybody knows or everybody should know, and you hear it all the time, and not everyone understands what it means. But take, for example, in Toronto, right? There's billions, like hundreds of billions of dollars worth of projects going on. There's one treaty rights holder, it's Mississaugas of the Credit. There's a number of communities around, but the amount of consultation, the amount of interest, the amount of outreach to those nations is overwhelming. So if you're thinking about it from a business perspective, you really want to take time and approach these communities in a really thoughtful way. Because, you know, when I was working there, we would have people reach out all the time and say, hey, we want to have a meeting. I said, okay, great. What do you guys want to talk about? Well, and they say, we want to have a relationship. And we're just like, what does that mean, right? So I really would caution, you know, businesses to think more critically about what their relationship is that they're looking for, and sort of what's the give and take or the benefit to each side of the partnership.
Thanks, Marissa. Thank you, Chris. Thank you both for your insightful reflections today. Just to wrap up, I think what we've heard today reinforces that Indigenous youth are not just the future of entrepreneurship, but they're driving it today. And Chris, you're a great example of that. Corporate partners like TELUS are showing that partnerships are built on trust, reciprocity, and shared values, and those can unlock real opportunities for economic reconciliation. And financing models that are flexible, Indigenous-led, and community-driven are key to sustaining that growth. So at NACA every day, we see that when Indigenous entrepreneurs are given the right tools, they're able to succeed, and they're not just building businesses, but they're building stronger communities. And so as we move forward, our challenge is to build on these examples that were shared in the room today, to connect capital, youth, and partnership in a way that transforms reconciliation into shared economic success. So thank you all for being here. I wish you a wonderful rest of your evening and a great conference over the next couple of days. And take care for now. Nawagoa.
Thank you. What an important conversation, but also what energy that this panel brought to the room, especially at the end of the day. So thank you very much to them and for so ably summing up the key points of the conversation. That does mark the end of our first day here together at the Toronto Global Forum. We have a lot of discussions ahead tomorrow and Friday, which you won't want to miss, but we start bright and early with coffee in the foyer available as of 7:30, and then our official program will get underway closer to 8:30 a.m. I want to invite you to join us now in the Participants Lounge because you all deserve a cocktail. You've earned it, and that's what's being served. They also have our cultural program, which is on there, and you won't want to miss that. The Participants Lounge is sponsored by Toronto Inc., whose partners include Toronto Global, the Toronto Region Board of Trade, and Destination Toronto. We hope you have a lovely evening. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you.